Hello, my name is Aaron Cavan and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Post-Burnout.com. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. This is our website's podcast where we publish full-length recordings of our interviews, which are sometimes the unedited versions of our site's articles and at other times are exclusives. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out. We hope you enjoy and consider subscribing, giving the episodes a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or giving it a rating if you're anywhere else. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright, in this edition of Post-Burnout.com interviews, we speak with Evan Walsh. Evan is the former drummer of the successful Cavan band The Strypes and is currently the bassist for the Savage Hearts. Evan tells us of how the Savage Hearts began, how their music differs from his other projects, their new single Silver Locket, which was released today, how his time on a major label with The Strypes influenced him to go down an independent route with this new venture, working with the Galway-based indie label Blowtourch Records, record collecting, supporting Foo Fighters and Arctic Monkeys, and much more. If you like what you hear, you can actually catch the Savage Hearts live at the Foggy Jew Dublin on November 30th. As far as I'm aware, that's a free show, so you just arrive at the door. They will also support the Undertones at the Town Hall Arts Centre in Cavan on December 6th. There's a link for tickets to that show in the description of this episode. Thank you and enjoy.
Hi,
Can
Aaron.
you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you and see you good there. How you getting on?
I'm grand, man. How are you?
Not too bad at all. Yeah, no, thanks for chatting with us. Good to speak to you.
Oh, absolutely, man. It's really nice to talk with you. There's I guess a lot to get into, so I'll just
Yeah, for
jump straight in
sure.
if that's good with you.
Yeah, for sure. So you do it as it's just an audio podcast kind of job that we're
Yeah,
gonna.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
perfect.
record a
Perfect.
video for my own sake, but
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's perfect. No, I just didn't want to be shafting you with bad lighting or
oh
anything.
no, that's
You know,
grand.
that's what I was concerned about.
I'm not precious about those things.
Okay, good stuff. Well, that's all right.
um, the first thing I was gonna ask, man. I mean, obviously, I think people were familiar with you from your tenure with the Stripes, and
Uh-huh.
um, also in between Zen Arcade, which I didn't want to gloss over because
Yeah, yeah.
that's the Husker Du album is one of my favorite records.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
So
good.
I'm proud of anyone who like gives them kudos.
Yeah, do a little reference on our part. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
now,
that was.
obviously, sorry,
Go
go
on,
ahead.
sorry, you fire ahead.
No. You were going to say something. I didn't want to trip you up.
It's all good. It's all good. No, I was just gonna say that was kind of a little project myself and some of the other ex Stripes did. It kind of during the COVID years,
Yeah.
really, because we were all kind of in that strange limbo kind of period, and yeah, gave it that the Husker Du inspired name, just because I think that was a kind of a favorite album at the time that we were all really, really enjoying, and it's great. It's a great album, great album. We thought it was a cool name.
It's quite apropos too, because if you listen to that record, I mean, there is a lot of like 60s psychedelia kind of
Yeah.
taken in. Obviously,
Mhm.
Husker Du, like, used to cover the Birds, 8 Mile High,
Mhm.
and they
Yeah.
did Ticket to Ride and things like
Yes,
that.
yes.
So
They did some really cool versions of that sort of thing. Yeah, the
I
version of
know, I love
8 Miles High is really out there version, if I remember correctly.
it.
Yeah.
Also, they did Sunshine Superman Donovan on their first
Yeah,
record
yeah,
too.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it is
yeah.
actually kind of like it's a very like I think fitting tribute.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, for sure. It was all kind of linked in, and that's kind of like a lot of bands or a lot of people or whatever are kind of, your musical taste. It has that kind of tentacle like thing. It's stretching from one scene to
Yeah,
another scene, but there's always, I think most people you'll find some sort of through line, and you kind of go like, yeah, so like, the Husker Du thing, they're putting their spin on that style, and you kind of, I think maybe you kind of come to different. You might come to different scenes or different genres at different times of your life, but then you kind of find that there's a through line of your own taste running through these
yeah.
different things that you as you discover things, I suppose, as you change and with time.
Well, actually, that's it's an interesting jumping off point because
Mm,
I mean, obviously, like a lot of your music is kind of it's very like aware of like what came the 20th century. It's
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's very aware of kind of like not only the kind of mainstream
Mm,
pop, the mainstream rock, which obviously there are influences from, but also the kind of more underground kind of garage
yeah,
rock
yeah.
scenes and things like that. Do you think it's
Mm.
kind of important to for any musician to be kind of aware of what came before them? And generally now, I mean, in the kind of era of streaming, like I
Mm.
think having access to the history of like recorded music at your fingertips,
Yeah,
it
on
makes that
tap.
very accessible.
Oh, for sure. No, you're dead right. Actually, you made a point I was actually going to make there when you were kind of lining that up because that's something that I think is a big thing with contemporary music and contemporary musicians, that they're, I even think, let's say, when the Strypes started, when we started out, we were very young when we kind of came on the scene, and it was
Yeah,
like closer to, but like, yeah, 10 between 10 and 15 years ago, really, that we came on the scene. And we're still only very young men now,
yeah, yeah,
but we were very, very young then. We were teenagers when we had this kind of little spotlight thrust upon us, and it was very much a completely accidental thing, as in, we probably thought in our lives, if any of us get to do music professionally, or have any sort of coverage of anything we ever do musically, it'd be when we're this age now. But we
yeah,
were getting coverage and getting kind of a bit of a spotlight on us when we were like 15, 16 was when it initially started out. So it's knocking on 10 plus years. And so I actually even think back then there was a slightly more, we were in the iTunes CD era still. It was kind of
yeah.
dying at that time. It was just kind of on the way out, but it was, as in, obviously, I'm very much, I'm not a fan of uh kind of media, forms of media and forms of things. I'm not a fan of any of them dying, really, because I like the multiple
Mhm.
choice. I like the idea that, if collecting CDs is your thing, I don't like that to not be, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Somebody's gonna
totally.
like it, somebody's gonna appreciate it. And the same way that the vinyl thing has exploded, these days again, it's such a kind of a hip, thing. But the I think in our early experience, when we kind of came out with the early Stripes days, we always grew up being into garage rock, rhythm and blues, psychedelic stuff, punk, new wave, pub rock, uh, like, I mean, ska, reggae. I had a big thing with, from an early age, rockabilly. We loved all them different genres of music, because to us, it's just all out there floating in the air. It's all there to
Yeah.
be, as I say, it's like, and I think when we started out, they're almost in a pre-Spotify age. There was a little bit of an era, I think, where people were a little bit more closed-minded about,
Hmm.
oh, you're 16 in this year, you're only going to have this percentage of knowledge, which we always rebelled against. And we always thought, well, real genuine music people never were like that. And as in, if you go to anybody who was in a really, any interest in cool musical people down the years, it's like how, I'm a huge fan of a guy of Roy Wood, who was in the Move and stuff back in the day, and he was as much taking inspiration from classical music and pre, pre rock and roll, and pre, like, vaudevillian Edwardian music and stuff like that, and classical music that was from before his time. So
Yeah,
it was like you kind of have all these people, if any people that have these kind of interesting things about them, they're always non-discriminating towards the form of music. It's like, you know, uh, it's something that I could easily go off on a bit of a soapbox about, but to keep it
please do.
keep it condensed, I think that's something, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah, you and me both could be on that wavelength. And I think that's something that has changed now. And I think in the Spotify versus 10 years ago, people were a little bit more clicky and hipstery about things. Whereas I
Totally.
think now you do see lots of current bands, and their influences are all over the shop and all over the place, because, as you say, you have the whole of recorded music in this kind of vast, well, not the whole of, but most of recorded
Sure.
music on tap in this kind of vast sort of library. And as I say, I used to say this years ago, it's like people didn't make records to be listened to once or twice the year they were made and then forget about them. You know what I mean? Like disposable pop music, yeah, would have been probably made in that way in certain eras, but I think there's too much effort and too much time and too much, blood, sweat, and tears put into this stuff for it not to be an eternal source of inspiration or fun or enjoyment or excitement or whatever. And it's kind of like, I love that now, that there's a lot of bands and a lot of people, I think, where the year that something was released is kind of the last thing on people's mind. It's just like, oh, I came
Yeah.
across this really cool track and it's got me really excited.
Yeah, and also sometimes it's good when you kind of discover bands somewhat into their
Mm,
journey, where it's like then you have
mm,
like a discography to kind of discover. Then it's not just like
exactly.
piecemeal. Although I do like
Mm,
that too. I do like kind of like keeping up with like some of my
mm,
favorite acts too. But like I also do
mm,
kind of
mm,
like
mm.
having a kind of a plethora to kind of
Oh,
go
for
back
sure,
on.
for sure. And you can be a little bit spoiled as well, because if you get really into a band that, let's say, has a big discography so far, or they're like an older band, that they're already a finished thing,
Yeah.
all that stuff is out there. You have that excitement, and that was always my favorite thing, was the digging into things, the collecting of the albums, the well, finding out, as in I could get really nerdy, as in I'm
Yeah.
talking cataloging what was the B side of every
Yeah.
single.
Yeah.
If you ask me what's the B side of such and such a Who single, or a Move single or something like that, I would have. I don't know how much now at this. I'm
Sure, sure. I'm not
not
putting you
sure
on the
how on the
spot.
ball I am today, but if I've done my homework, I'd like to be like, oh, it was bang, that was the B side of that record, or
Yeah.
that was on that EP, or that was that. And just as a pure, obsessive lover of that sort of thing. So that's kind of one angle. You can kind of dig into that, and that really always got me going in an excited way of all this stuff is here for me to explore. But then, as you say, you can get into a new band then, and you go, oh wow, this is giving me a different buzz. But there is that frustration. Like, I mean, it's happened to me in the last couple of years. Get into a band that has one EP out or two singles.
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of why, actually, with our two singles we've done so far, with the Savage Hearts, we deliberately put B-sides that would go up on Spotify and all that as well, because if anybody was enjoying them or listening to them, I hate that thing of, it's you've just got the one single, or you've got the one or two tracks, that there's at least a little bit of something extra that you can kind
Yeah.
of, you know, gives you a little bit of a picture of, well, this is what the rest of the arsenal of the band might sound a bit like, that kind of thing. But yeah, that kind of living off the one album for a year or two is always quite tough, I think.
No, totally. And actually, one thing I enjoy is like, not
Mm.
giving preference to an A or B side, like it having kind of
Mm.
equal value and equal worth. It's not like
Oh, big
one
style,
one
yeah.
is a proper song, so to speak,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah, 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 yeah. Big style, absolutely. And I kind of thought that as well, very much on a similar wavelength there, because like uh, some B-sides, I think, again, it's like they develop that kind of hidden nugget kind of reputation down the years of, it's like, oh, tucked away on the B-side of such and such a
Yeah.
thing. But it's funny to think that there probably was an era, well, we know there was an era where singles were being sold more than albums. So it's kind of funny that more people once upon a time knew the B-side better than the album tracks, because it was the
Yeah.
one they had at home. And the album was more of a prized, rare thing. But nowadays, obviously, because we live in the thing with, we can afford to buy albums, and we have streaming, and we have everything else, the album as an entity is a little bit more of a kind of a, well, this is the big one, this is what you need to know about. And then the
Yeah.
B-side then gets kind of lost in a kind of it goes back to that kind of, as you say, that nugget sort of status. But there's B-sides that I think, what the hell were they thinking, not putting that on the album, or
Yeah,
that
yeah.
could have been the follow-up single just as easy, some real strong stuff.
And for the sake of argument, there are definitely sometimes B-sides where I'm like, yeah, I'm glad that one didn't make the record.
Oh, big style. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or sometimes album tracks, you think they should have just whacked that on the B-side.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also, when we talk about B-sides, like a lot of
Mm.
artists would sometimes use that as like to do a cover, for example, and
Oh
it was to
yeah,
sort
yeah,
of show how
absolutely.
they could take a classical song and kind of like rearrange it in their own style too. And I
Mm,
think that
mm,
was always
mm, mm, mm.
interesting. You strike me as
Yeah.
the kind of guy who would go on Discogs and look for like rarities and
Yeah, yeah,
are
yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
are you a
Like,
collector in that
definitely.
sense? Like in the sense that
Um,
you kind of like try and get the rare stuff, or what's your actual kind of like relationship with kind of buying records in that sense, I guess?
yeah, yeah. I think I've actually got better at that over the years. I think there was a time where, as you say, I was just listening to the music or the song in whatever way, shape, or form it was there in, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And possibly, even actually probably in the days of the Stripes, we did a lot of touring and a lot of traveling. And there would be times where you try to, if you happen to be in a record shop, or you happen to be in what, or in the vicinity of one, you
Yeah.
would kind of do a little bit of digging about and seeing if you could get anything interesting and different or whatever. And I suppose that's kind of something, and it's a generational thing, I'd say, but maybe people of our generation, we would have kind of come up in the CD era. So you would have actually it would have been like the CD on in the car, or making your
Yeah.
own compilation CDs or something like that would have been the kind of the era. So then I think I kind of, as I think, as the vinyl thing resurged, my interest actually resurged in it as well. That, you'd like think, well, it's kind of like getting a kind of a bookshelf together. It's kind of like, well, I can listen to whatever I want to listen to, on Spotify or this and the other. But I think it's that thing of, something that, and I do think a lot of people, from what I see, I think a lot of people kind of do this, where it, like, if something really hits a chord with you, then you do think, well, yeah, I can listen to it here, I can listen to it there, but I actually do want to own it as
Yeah,
a sign of my appreciation or adoration of something. So I think
totally.
that kind of grew on me as the years went by, that it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like going, like these are my favorite films or these are my favorite anything. It's kind of like, well, I want the shelf, I want the record of, well, literally record of this is these are the things that really kind of had an impact on you musically or something like that. Whereas obviously the old way would have been, you have to buy it to find out what it sounds like.
Totally.
But I think yeah, more so in the sense of, yeah, I would definitely be a visitor to Discogs for sure. Just in a kind of a, not so much maybe in a, I have bought a few records actually off Discogs, actually, kind of rare, couple of rare albums. I got really into a psychobilly band a year or two ago called King Kurt,
Yeah.
from the 80s, and really was getting into their thing, and I wanted a couple of the albums, and then I kind of got into that sort of Discogsy kind of world a little bit through that. But definitely would be a regular visitor to it for like kind of like my own sake of my own kind of nerdiness, basically, of just being like, oh well, what was on that kind of version of what was on the Dutch version of that album, or what was on
Yeah,
what, why does the American track listing of that differ to that? And all that, I really get sucked into that side of things. So
Oh yeah, like a lot of the record labels, like for some reason they would do like different they do different like versions. I think actually I'm not like I'm not hugely familiar with the band, like but with AC/DC, for example, I
yeah,
know
yeah,
that the Australian releases of their records were completely
mm,
different to the international versions for like
yeah,
the
yeah,
first
yeah.
albums and stuff like that.
Totally, totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like my gateway into that way of thinking was, I grew up in a house of total Beatle fanatics, as in like
Yeah.
mega, mega Beatle presence all the time. And so
There's
that
no shortage of memorabilia for them.
exactly, exactly. It's yeah, there's a lifetime plus of stuff you could be obsessing over. But like what was I going to say? Yeah, the Capitol Records Beatles albums in
Mm.
America are absolutely unrecognizable compared to
Yeah.
the official UK discography. So I mean, like that would have been my, even when I was a kind of 10, 11, 12, maybe you'd start, if you're going to be interested in that sort of thing, you start becoming kind of aware of, oh, that was kind of done. Oh, right. Oh, so they're different in other countries. That's really
Yeah.
weird, because you're growing up with the CDs in the car or whatever your way of becoming familiar with it is. And so that, yeah, that's definitely, I do love all that. Or I love, like, um, like I'm looking, just for the way where I'm literally sitting here. Dave Edmonds is one of my kind of favorite singers, guitar players, whatever. And I see one of his albums over there. And so I love that thing of, you go on Discogs or you go on whatever your source is, and you
Hmm.
kind of go, oh, the one that kind of, as you say, the German pressing or the Canadian pressing, his name was misspelled, Dave Edwards, or it was, you know what I mean? There was
Yeah, yeah.
some kind of thing, or it said, or there's like, the wrong songwriting credit was put on this, or the track had a different name in a different country and all that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, in a way, you can get like, I suppose there's room to get nerdy about most things. So I mean, like
Yeah.
that definitely, I think when you enter your teenage years, if it grabs you at that time, I don't think it's going to leave you. That sort of thing of, you want to know all them little details. You want to know, that's as much for me as well. I was always that kind of person. Yeah, it was as much part of being into it as as the music itself was. The music
Yeah.
itself was like the main component, but it was probably about like 80 to 85%, where the other percent was about, the accumulating the information, the different versions of albums, the backstory, the biography, the this, you know what I mean? It was all
Yeah, I totally get it.
total. I'm a full package kind of guy in that kind of way.
And that's before you even account for like bootlegs. I always think that's like really
Oh
interesting. It's
yeah.
like some random guy in like Germany,
Mm.
like West
Oh
Germany in
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
67.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, and that's something actually that I got very into with bands that I've never let go of either. And it was actually when we started gigging live with the band back in the day, and we started touring and traveling around and all that sort of stuff. And you're kind of learning the discipline, as someone in a band, you're learning the discipline of the set list, the structuring of the set list.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so initially, you don't really separate when you're younger. You're thinking about, let's say, how a track listing of an album is a completely different school of thought and different principle to how you structure a set list. So then
Hmm.
when you're kind of starting when you're young, you're kind of doing songs, you're trying to make a set list. But then I was lucky, I suppose, that my dad was in a band, and I have and my uncles and lots of people were cousins and stuff. I have lots of family members that were in bands, and I grew up around that kind of thing. So I had people telling me early on that, you structure a set list like it's a bit of a, you're taking people on a ride of, you want the bang bang first three or four songs to be the real kind of, punch in the face opener, kind of, you start on that kind of impactful, you
The
know,
bombastic intro kind of,
yeah,
yeah.
bombastic intro. You want to kind of blow people's faces off a wee bit, and then you
Yeah.
kind of take it down to a middle pace, and then you bring it up again, and then you do the slow song, and
It's
then
kind of the roller coaster way of doing things.
exactly, exactly. And like, let's say if you're doing a slow one in the middle, like, don't do your slow one too near the end. You kind of have to
Yeah.
position it, let's say, like, halfway or just before halfway through, and then you have to come out of the slow one with something that's another kind of bang, we're back up here again, and the climax and all that. So that kind of mindset being kind of bred into me, then, excuse me, I became really into, as a teenager, other bands' bootlegs and the whole thing of like, because as well, when you're touring, you have lots of free time to be
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of pissing about, basically. So
Yeah.
like, kind of, so you're on the laptop, or you're reading, or you're doing whatever. And if I read in a book about a band's biography about such and such a show, I'd try and find out, oh, was that ever bootlegged? Or like,
Yeah.
and you kind of realize, oh yeah, hang on a minute, all these bands that I'm listening to, or obsessing over, when they played live, sometimes it was a completely different experience than what they're known for as a studio band, or as so you kind of have that thing then of, the live versions, and, a bootleg, as you say, of somebody playing in the Paradiso in Amsterdam in
Hmm.
1979 or something like that. And it's like, oh wow. So you can see when as they change as performers, then their live identity changes, the set list changes, the
Hmm.
whole flow of the show changes. So that was another thing, as you say, bootlegging, and again, probably starting off with like Beatles bootlegs, which are fairly hard listens most of the time because of the screaming
Yeah.
and stuff. So they're fairly like, and the crude nature of the equipment as well, as in the
Yeah.
bootlegging
Yeah.
equipment can be pretty dodgy, like, so there's a lot of kind of, you can't make out. It's like the crackle and the distortion and the hissing of the sound equipment fighting with the kind of jet engine scream of the fan. So that's kind of a tough one. But then even
It's just a
like,
cacophony of noise.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, I can catch a little bit of She's a Woman in there, and right, or whatever. But then but you get into more sophisticated bootlegs and stuff like, especially from that late 70s, 80s period. There's some fantastic bootlegs, really interesting, like a lot of punk and new wave bands. Like, I would have been very into, Madness are actually a very well bootleg
Yeah.
live act. Some might be surprised to say. And I was so into them, such an obsessed fan of them, that you kind of see how their set list kind of changed and evolved. That was one, that's kind of one line that I really got into. Or like, um who else was really good on the bootleg front? There's like, well, I mean, a band that was a big influence on all of us, actually, in the early days of the band, was the House Martins, the 80s band.
Hmm.
And uh first musical project really of Fatboy Slim, not that it bears
Yeah.
any resemblance to. but I remember a friend of my dad's actually had a House Martins bootleg that he'd made when he was younger in the 80s. When they played, he was in London and they played in such and such a place. And that kind of was an early awakening into that sort of, you know, getting as fascinated with the show. It's like you don't have to be at the show to be fascinated by, okay,
Yeah.
this band as a live entity is a whole other thing.
No, and actually, one thing I think is really interesting is I find bootlegs to be kind of historical documents. I think it's a real pity that, so many artists back in the day were so resilient to people recording their shows, because I think
Yeah,
concerts
yeah.
are kind of an ephemeral thing where it's like you
Mm,
go on the night, the band performs, and then it's over and it doesn't exist anymore.
mm,
But I think, like, as you were mentioning, like, you really get
mm.
a sense of the kind of the maturity of a musical project through the history of bootlegs. And I think it's really
Absolutely.
unfortunate that, like, people
Yeah.
used to, like, venues, or like even sometimes the artists themselves would kind of like scope out people recording and like kick them out and stuff like that, because
Oh
it's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's really
Absolutely.
unfortunate.
Wasn't it like Peter Grant? I think Led
Yeah.
Zeppelin's manager. He's the famous one, isn't he, for like
Yeah. Yeah.
smashing up the
Yeah.
bootleg stuff and
He was a
kicking the
character.
guy. Yeah, yeah, exactly. He's like, throwing the tape machine down a flight of stairs and,
Yeah.
kicking
Yeah.
out and stuff. So it's like you get all that, definitely, as you say, that culture, which is a real shame, because I know they were in an era when the live album was a real precious, I don't
Seller.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
thing, and they wanted to have control over what shows were heard or this and that and the other. But at the same time, as I say, for people like us, that's that's not going to wash because you're thinking, well, I just want to hear whatever, I want to hear whatever
Yeah,
little
yeah.
curios you have in there and kind of different shows. And well, like, and again, you kind of find out how, as you say, yeah, and it could even be one song. You could listen to like a couple of bootlegs of the same band from a period of years, and you go, God, that song really evolved as a live thing. That they, let's say, oh, they used to close the set with such and such a song, and it's like, oh, they started out doing it like the studio version, but then by year two or year three of playing it or closing the show with it or whatever, it had
Yeah.
mutated into this completely different arrangement, this
It
totally
was like a
different.
10-minute jam. Yeah. I
Yeah,
always
yeah,
love that
yeah.
when you can extend like the
Exactly,
songs to because
exactly.
people just don't want to go home.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Exactly, exactly.
They
And
want to experience all of it.
exactly, and it's evolved in that sort of natural sort of way of like, oh, this has gone down really well with crowds, and it's kind of changed as the band has changed. But then, yeah, like I mean, and that's I actually find that a lot when I'm looking at live photography or like even the old grainy
Yeah.
silent footage of bands from the 60s and 70s in particular, because let's say from the 80s to now you have more document, you can get more documentation of things, of events, as we all people now have, they have video cameras
And
that
that creates new fans because I think of
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the band Fugazi, and it's like they
Yes, yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
survived through bootlegs. Like they really built
Absolutely,
their
yeah.
fan base because they weren't by intention, they weren't getting
Mm.
like mainstream attention.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
offered it, but they elude not to. And I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what they do is actually very smart. Where on
Mm.
Discord, their record label, they sell the bootlegs, and they try and give the fans money, and they obviously
Yeah,
get a
yeah.
cut. And it's like I think it's a really nice way of preserving an artist's history.
Oh, completely, yeah. And then there you have that kind of like the band kind of incorporating the fans'
Yeah,
enthusiasm or the fans, kind of it's like audience participation in a multimedia sense. You know what I mean? That the fans are as much part of the story of the band as the band itself then, because
yeah,
you have, as you say, the people who made the bootlegs or the things that become, if something becomes like a really, as you say, famous or sought after bootleg, and the band then release it or whatever. So like you definitely have that and like that's kind of yeah, it can be a really nice kind of element, like as you say, like a band like Fugazi, let's say, if you're going against the the prevailing trend or the prevailing sense of this is what a band's supposed to do. They're kind of
yeah,
booking the system. I think it's a really cool way. Like as in, I've thought that even with the Savage Arts, it's still a very new, excuse me, it's a very new project in the world, but it's something that I, like anybody, we if you're doing working on a band or working on a project, you think about, oh, where could this go? Where could this do? And you kind of think, oh, doing your own live bootlegs, that'd be so cool.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and why not record your own gigs and put them out on Bandcamp or whatever it is? And that kind
I
of,
think a lot of artists are doing that now, actually. A
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
artists
yeah.
are kind of, before they have material out, are basically just
Mm,
recording their gigs. You can get just from the soundboard, and with recording, I mean, you
mm,
can get like some really, I think, really beautiful video now, and some really, and it really
absolutely.
showcases. It's actually a good thing if I also think like, because, for artists who are kind of starting out, who don't have music out yet, if
Mm,
you're trying to like get the attention of a promoter or a venue, you can
mm.
just like send them your live footage and go, here's a gig we did.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, we kind of sort of did that ourselves, even with the Savage Charts now. Like, I mean, we've been kind of trying to, I suppose we've been getting this off the ground for probably about 18 months, I'd say, from the
Yeah.
gestation of getting players together, getting things happening, all that sort of stuff. And I had been kind of manifesting it in my head even before that, sort of thing. But definitely, if you have that kind of, as you say, something that was filmed at a gig or something that kind of has a kind of an earthy, raw bootleg vibe, it actually kind of captures the spirit more than something, especially if it's something, let's say, like
Yeah.
if it is a garage rock band or if it's, but it works across all genres, unless you're working in something where like you're doing something that's really like, you know, where let's say something maybe like a folk project or something where the kind of like fidelity is really important
Yeah.
to getting the vibe. If you're doing something that it could work for, I think it could work for electronic music or it could work for, if you're doing any kind of thing, that if it's something from a gig that kind of captures, it mightn't be, it's like not the best quality, but it captures that kind of, electric atmosphere or something like that you're trying to get across. It's nearly better than having a kind of a slick pro shot, you know, this is our kind of PR video, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It can be,
Totally.
it can give a better sense. If it's kind of street music, if you know what I mean, if it's the kind of music that is like, heard in small venues or club nights or and like that, whatever the genre is. I think that I love that organic uh kind of gestation, really. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like you were saying there about B-sides, with covers and stuff like that. Nothing drives me more mental than if it's a band or somebody I'm into that you hear that they used to do such and such a version of a song live at
Yeah.
gigs and did a cover that you'd never imagine them doing or like
Yeah,
they're
that drives me
yeah
insane when you
and
see
then
the
it's
set
and it's
list.
like no known footage or no known audio
Yeah.
survives of such and such a band doing this, and it's like you read like I've read old reviews, let's say, of old gigs from a band that I'd be into, and it says and they might name check a song in the review as like, oh, they did a version of this or they did a version of that, and you go, for God's sake, you know
Also,
somebody.
like when you read like bands biographies or
Mm,
autobiographies and they're talking about music, like I'm one of those people who like if I don't know a song when if I'm reading a book,
mm.
I was like I have to seek it, I have to listen to it just to know what they're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And you start kind of forming the picture in your head then to do with that. So I totally relate to all that stuff. I think all that kind of, as you say, it's like we said there about being into somebody, loving a band, loving a musician or whatever. It's like, you know, the discography, the core discography is only one
Yeah,
one key element. It's key, but it's
totally.
you kind of have that when you really kind of get sold on somebody's uh whole kind of vibe or whole career or something like that. You do want to see those things, and you want to kind of, like as you said, the little bits that kind of slip between the cracks of something that was only ever done live or something that was only ever done for a kind of a Swiss TV appearance
Yeah.
in the early 80s or something like that. I think that's such a uh, I think it's such a kind of a part of actually what makes it's like fun, really, or it's like the kind of the buzz that you kind of get because um you kind of, I don't know, you want to go through all the different layers of what makes you like this thing.
Yeah, and I love even going back to like old grey whistle test footage and
Oh,
things like
same.
that, and just
Absolutely.
being
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
or like the Beat Club or things like that.
Yes,
It's
yes,
just a
no,
great.
absolutely. You're the first, I think, to be like genuinely. I've been, I couldn't tell you how many interviews I've done or how many chats I've done to do with bands or to do with things over the years, and you're the first man to name drop Beat Club so
Yes.
casually. Yeah, in such a casual manner. Beat Club is such a big thing for me.
Totally.
Like it's in, and you could say with the even with the Stripes, you could say us all in the early days, like we kind of learned about. Because as well, that's another thing. When you're in a when you're into bands and into music, and you're passionate about the idea of being in the band, and you're passionate about all that sort of stuff, but you happen to be, 14, 15, 16, which loads of people are at that age, passionate about being in bands and stuff like that. You're not going to be going to that many gigs. You're not going to
No.
be seeing that many bands. You know what I mean? Especially like,
Yeah.
we're
Especially here because like all the venues are like over 18.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, apart from being brought to a concert in inverted commas, which is generally like a bigger concert or something like that, you're not going to be at actual. It's like the distinguishing line between a concert and a gig. The
Yeah.
concert being the kind of more,
Big
you
event.
big
Yeah.
event, but the actual down home gig that you're going to end up playing as a member of a band, you're not going to have access to that, except the fact that we were lucky enough, people like ourselves, to be young in the YouTube era, that, as you say, all of a sudden it's like, well, I have every episode of every German
Yeah.
music live show of all these bands that I've either grown up listening to or I've just discovered because I've read about somebody I like saying I listen to this band, or literally, like as you say, if you're into, if you grow up listening to the Beatles and the Who and stuff like that, then your next step is, oh wow, I'm into the Move or the Spencer Davis Group or some, going slightly more obscure with
Yeah.
a certain scene. It's like, class, I can watch them play live to a really kind of bored looking German audience, and get a bit of
That is true. They always look very static.
exactly, yeah. And I think, probably, I suppose the conditions, they're always seem to be fairly I don't know, Yeah, they're fairly industrial looking places a lot of the time where these
Right,
people
right.
film. But not really like the vibey kind of club sort of thing. So
Do you
uh
ever see that footage of I think it was like one of the first like early Kraftwerk gigs, and
oh
people
right, yeah,
just
yeah.
don't really know what they're listening to.
What the hell to
Yeah,
make of it?
yeah, and I think it's
Yeah, yeah,
fascinating
yeah.
too because I think that's the other thing too because we're mentioning
Mm,
things like the B Club, and we're mentioning things
mm,
like All Great Whistle Test, and I
mm,
think
mm,
beyond just like the band's history, I think it actually is a good rep like the B Club is just like a
mm.
great representation of kind of like West Germany at that time, in the
For
70s and
sure,
things like
for
that.
sure.
You see the fashion. It's like it's small things like even when I watch like old films, for example, I'm
Mm.
very this is nerdy on my part, but I'm like very fascinated by the reference points they make, like what
Oh
are they
yeah,
talking about in
yeah.
terms of pop culture and things like that.
Oh, I
I
would.
think it's
You're preaching to the choir again there. I love all that sort of thing, and I
no, and
love.
I know like
Yeah, yeah, and I love a time or an idiom or something being kind of captured like that, as you say. So like you can kind of go, oh well, yeah. So like you kind of get, let's say, if you're into a band, as you say, of that time, so you have the old grey whistle test captures that kind of English
yeah,
vibe, and everything's very kind of reserved. And sure, in the early episodes, you have that thing where they don't even have a set; it's just the walls of
yeah,
their studio and stuff like that. And like that was a really big one for like getting into with us in the early days, getting into like Dr. Feelgood and Nick Lowe and people like that. They were very much of that whistle test. Ian Jury and the Blockheads, they're very much of that whistle test
yeah,
genre. Even there's a great clip of I've seen it again recently. I haven't seen it in ages again. It's like the Ramones doing Rock and Roll High School and stuff like that on the old grey whistle.
yeah,
And it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant because it's kind of like that absolutely bare bones. You wanted to see the band playing, here's the band play. You know what I mean? I'll give
yeah,
you the band playing with no airs and graces or no kind of no showbiz really about it at all. It's
yeah,
very much it is for the kind of chin stroking music fan,
yeah,
as a chin
totally.
stroking music fan, it's going to kind of scratch that itch. Where even as you say, I think just as time goes on, we all get just more obsessed with the set decoration around it, the whole
Yeah.
kind of presentation of it, and you have oh well then things become more about oh this has to look like you know it's shot in the best possible quality on the best possible camera,
Yeah, because it was always
best
very
possible
flat. It was
sound.
always just like, it was always just like a profile of the band and complete, and then maybe like
Yeah,
a couple of shots of like, the lead singer, and then
yeah,
there's also
yeah,
like
yeah,
maybe a
yeah,
couple of
yeah.
shots of just like maybe the bassist or
Exactly,
something.
exactly. Whereas nowadays, because you have the resources and you have the kind of thing, if you do, or like when we did telly, if the handful of times, or
Yeah,
if you see a band you like on telly now or doing a session, it's like even an online radio session, whatever. Nowadays you can say, "Oh, we'll put a GoPro on the fucking
yeah,
the end of the ride symbol so you can catch this."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's kind of like so. There's all kind of more kind of gimmickry or more kind of stuff like that. But the fact that they
It's
will
very
go
pageantry. Yeah,
yeah, as you say, exactly. So as you say, old grouse to test and stuff like that, it's really like plonk the camera there, there's the band, this is what they're
yeah,
wearing, this is what they're doing, this is it. That
yeah.
kind of thing. So
Sometimes they didn't even bother putting the camera on the audience,
yeah, for sure, exactly, exactly, exactly. And then
which
sometimes
is
you're
fair
like,
because you probably just get very demure, kind of like Germans just
yeah, 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 yeah. And
like.
sometimes you go, wow, there was an audience. Didn't even
Yeah,
realize
yeah.
that. Is
Yeah.
it kind
Sometimes
of
they didn't even mic them. It was funny.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
sometimes they
yeah,
wouldn't even
yeah,
bother
yeah.
to mic them. So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
artist would like end the song and you wouldn't hear anything and then just go, thank you.
Yeah, 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 literally, literally. And like I'm sure you're a rock palast man.
Yeah, oh yeah. I was gonna say
Yeah.
you were on that, like in Cologne,
Oh
I
yeah,
believe.
actually,
Yeah.
yes, yes, we were. Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
was I was gonna ask about the
Oh,
lineage of
really?
that.
That's hilarious. That's a good timing on my part. But yeah,
Well,
no,
I think Rock Ballast were really so ahead of the game. Like I remember
mm,
watching Patti Smith's set. I forget she was playing in
mm,
Germany somewhere, obviously
mm,
Rock Blast, but she was
yeah,
playing somewhere, and I think it was a '79. It's just like a really powerful concert where it's like you
yeah,
just see that kind of like rawness of.
mm.
And I actually saw Patti Smith just over the summer at Figure Street,
Oh,
and like
wow, very good.
she still has it,
Oh,
man.
that
Like
must have been
she's
great.
it's still just such a like sincere, impassioned kind of set,
Mm,
you know what I mean? And
mm,
I think like that's what Rock Palace is great at. Like they were,
mm,
I think, for lack of a better term, more cinematic than a lot of things that were going on. You really feel like
mm,
you're in the game. There was I can't think of the name of the movie now. You probably know what I'm talking about, but there was
mm,
a movie in the late '70s that was stick dating the kind of the ska movement at the time with like
Oh
bands like
yeah,
the
Dance
Strypes and
Craze. Yeah, yeah,
Dance
yeah,
Craze,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
just
yeah.
such a beautiful film. Like it really
Mm,
gets you in the sense of like being on stage with the
absolutely.
band. It's just like
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
great.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And they remastered Dance Craze recently, or in the
Yes,
last couple
yes.
of years, and it just looks sensational because it's all that real, like, you know, uh stuff that I'd been watching again when we were on the road with Stripes, and you're in hotel rooms and all that. You'd be watching it on YouTube in this really horrible, grainy,
Right.
nobody's done anything to make it look nice. It's all kind of
It's just a
unrestored.
VHS rip.
Yeah, yeah, VHS rip, or it's even pixelated, or there's something, it's like
Yeah.
the resolution and all that sort of stuff is it's as good as we could do at the time. But the fact that then to have something like that, and you kind of think, God, why has this footage just been forgotten about? That you have all these
Yeah.
bands at the peak of their powers, really. It's like the Specials and Madness in particular, and the Beat as well, and stuff like that. Like they're really kind of at that real sweet spot of their live careers, that sort of thing of
Yeah.
if you're gonna document this band, this is the document of it.
And
And
it's also a documentation of kind of again the history. That's the other thing that I enjoy
oh
because like
yeah, yeah,
obviously at that
yeah,
time you had like things like the National Front and they were going to gigs and
yeah, yeah,
protesting and
kind of
stuff like that.
yeah, and kind of trying to sort of hijack the whole sort of
Yeah,
scene,
yeah. I
skinheading
think that's
and all
I
that.
love that kind of external shit. Like even
Mm,
like I
mm.
love when you watch like old concert footage and they just
Mm.
like take a shot of the venue outside and people lining up and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
really
yeah,
it really gives you a sense of the kind of popularity. And I know
absolutely, yeah,
most
yeah.
places never even thought to do that. Like or even like something like taking a shot of like a ticket stub. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
just like little
A
trivia and
ticket
stuff like that.
that
Like
cost like £2.50 to get in and see, like,
yeah, I
you
remember
know.
I saw a ticket for Guns N' Roses at Slane '92 and it
Mm.
cost £22. I was like, Jesus Christ, like that's insane.
But then, yeah, and that like so like comparatively recent as well, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Where like you see stuff from years ago, and it's like a pound to see, the Clash or something like that. But
yeah,
the yeah, and it's funny that actually because obviously the whole ticket price uh argument is kind of reared up again lately. You know what I
yeah,
mean? A
totally.
lot of people that were saying it, and that's actually we had an amazing thing happen in Cavan actually in our locally we had a thing where me mentioning the House Martins earlier on, the Paul Heaton, frontman of the House Martins
Yep,
and the Beautiful South and all that. He came and played actually in Cavan in the town hall,
yep.
and that's about I'd say 45 seconds away from where I'm currently sitting, and it's like he brought his full rig. He did this Irish tour where he'd actually been playing in the Tree Arena the night before he played in
Yep.
Cavan, and he brought the same lighting rig, the whole crew, the whole shebang, the whole stage setup. He brought it all down and did the whole thing, and played in the town hall in Cavan, which holds about 500 people and that's at a wedged standard
Yeah,
kind of capacity. And normally the kind of thing where there'd be like, it's the kind of place it's more for Boy Scouts, pantos and stuff like that is more
right.
known for down the years. But like you had Paul Heaton doing his full House Martin's Beautiful South kind of solo set, and the tickets were like 30 quid.
Yeah,
And he did the same in Dublin then when he did play the arena shows and all that. He kept it out like, I don't think there was a ticket on the tour probably that was more than 30 or 35 quid because he's doing it to
yeah.
show, to prove to people this is kind
It
of
can
how
be
much
done.
you're getting screwed by other people. He says, because I can do this, and he's someone who's like, I don't need the money. Like most people who are at this level,
Yeah,
I don't need the money. I'm gonna survive. I'm gonna be well off no matter what. That this is how much people kind of screw you. The other companies, the handling fees, the resale things, all that sort of
yeah.
stuff. It's all tied up in all that
Yeah. And
nonsense.
also the other thing I was interested in, I remember a couple of years ago when see the Cure at the arena,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
I was amazed at how cheap they're not only the tickets but the merch too, and
Mm,
that's like with
mm.
like merch cuts and stuff like that at the venue,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
still
yeah,
able
yeah.
to have a t-shirt for 25 quid or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah. And like you have the venue already trying to bump up the price for even
Yeah,
selling the t-shirt on the behalf of the band and all that sort of, like
true.
the minimum price and thing. It's incredible how out of control that gets. But I did see Robert Smith was being very outspoken as well about
Yeah.
that. Him and Paul
Good
Eaton
for
kind of,
him.
yeah, they're the kind of two guys I've seen recently that have been really saying, it doesn't have to actually be like that. That people are kind of, it is just a way of kind of suckering people into how can we kind of eke the most money out of this that we possibly can. And because the tickets are for a big name or a big whatever, you think, oh, well, That's just how
No,
it is. That's
yeah,
this big person. It must cost that much to put this show on the road, but it
yeah.
doesn't. As we know, that kind of thing.
Man, there's so much I want to ask based on a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
what
yeah,
you're saying
absolutely.
there. So the first thing I was going to ask, from your kind of like lineage with the Stripes. I mean, obviously you guys were
Mm.
like just such a massive act at the time. Like I think it's
Nice, nice of you to
like
say.
no, really, and obviously, I mean, we're talking about kind of documentation and video. I mean,
Mm.
how I first got aware of your band was through the toy show, actually. I guess when you
Oh
played
wow, right on
Stars
day
Timing there.
one, absolute day one.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
like, I mean,
yeah,
even to have that like documentation is kind of like your Ed Sullivan moment, the toy show, I guess. Um,
yeah.
um,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
having
yeah,
all that
yeah.
documentation where like at the time, because I legitimately was a fan of the Stripes, and like I
Oh,
remember
thank you very much,
um
man. Really
like
appreciate it.
seeing you guys at like Rock am Ring and watching that video
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
all
yeah,
these kind of things where it's like
yeah.
and obviously David Letterman and things like that. Do you think now as you can kind of is it nice to you to have that footage that you can kind of look back on and kind of like go, that's my life in a way. Do you
Oh,
view it
for
like that?
sure. Yeah, for sure. It definitely is. Definitely is. That's thanks very much for
Oh, absolutely.
enjoying all the stuff and all the things like that. Because yeah, the and that's amazing that you were on board.
Yeah, yeah.
Toy show time
Day
because
one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you were on board even before we knew we were on board. Um, so it was like, yeah, because that was the flukiest, most random thing ever. And
Yeah,
probably that was literally was us just being a load of kids and a load of like, what were we, 14 or something like that, and just did it on the whim. And we'd already like it was kind of a thing that we did a few times, just because we started playing together when we were about 12, I'd say. And it was like that thing of just playing in the school concert and doing all that sort of stuff just as the hobby. In the real classic, kids in the school have done a band thing and we know 3 songs or 4 songs or whatever. And so that's how that all came about, like the toy show thing. Because like we I think we sent it off like 3 years in a row just because it'd be like, wouldn't it be gas? Because
yeah.
people were telling us that we were sounding good and stuff like that. They'd be like, wouldn't it be so gas to actually end up on the telly and do a song? And if that was the height of it, then that'd be great. Like we tried to get on the year before that. We actually did Rockaway Beach by the Ramones
Hmm.
the year before
Yep.
that, and we did. I think we probably were trying to. I don't know. We're probably doing Teenage Kicks or some real early beginner type song the first time. So it was just a little thing we thought of at Christmas a few times. We're like, oh, we just send it away for the crack because we thought we'd see the people who'd get on it and the bands that would get on it. And it is that classic thing of, well, if they can get on it, surely we can get on it. If people are like thinking, we're not doing too bad for a load of kids playing music, surely there's a chance. And we got on that year, so yeah, doing Sour Standing There and all that, and that probably actually what spurred us on to become an actual band was in the time since that. We'd a little bit of local buzz around us then for doing that. It'd give us an excuse to play locally and people would be interested because we were the lads who'd just been on the telly and it was all that kind of thing.
Was it easy to play? Sorry, not to interrupt, but just
Oh
kind of
no, go
going on what
on.
you're saying there. Was it easy to kind of get gigs being underage at the time?
Well, only that's actually the thing. I'd say it was the toy show that will only kind of enabled that as a catalyst type thing because we were that young. We kind of had this little local residue of, oh, here's the lads that were on the toy show, you're on the
Yeah.
telly, and you kind of have on that local level people who maybe, let's say, aren't really that up on the music buzz, want you to come and play at, we're doing such and such a day here, or have such and such a charity event on here, or such and such, and it kind of gets you the experience that probably, as I say, it was that little buzz that spurred us on to because we actually got the chance to play, and it wasn't just doing 3 songs at a school concert. It was like, oh, we're actually starting to play at if somebody had, as you say, like I mean, what would be on like yeah, like a local charity thing where there was loads of local people playing music or this and that and the other, and then we would start getting gigs um in pubs and stuff like that when we were underage, and because obviously we were growing up in the country in rural Ireland, it wasn't as much of an issue.
Sure.
Just kind of nipping in and out as long as
Getting
you
paid
weren't.
in Lucas Aid.
Yeah, 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 and as long as you weren't, you weren't kind of taking the Mickey or whatever. So,
Sure.
we would just kind of slip in and out and play these gigs, and we just have to be in and out. And the only time we'd be allowed in the place would be when we were actually on the job, gigging,
I've
sort of
heard
thing.
that from other artists too, where it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you get
yeah.
in and it's like, okay, you're on, and then like
And then you're out the back. Yeah, yeah. So like I mean,
you're
and
like, can
then
I take my equipment?
yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. And I think then because we'd got into doing that kind of, kind of garage rock and kind of blues R&B with the garage rock kind of feel. We got so into that through, all the methods, all the means we were talking about earlier of discovering music, getting into, the Yardbirds and Dr. Feelgood and the Animals and all them people,
Yeah.
which then, as you say, leads you back to all the proper blues guys. So then you're becoming obsessed with John Lee Hooker and Bo Diddley and Chuck Berry and all that sort of stuff. So because of that, then we developed this niche where we were these young lads in this really unlikely surrounding, playing this set list that nobody else was playing, or doing this vibe that nobody else at the time was doing of
Mhm.
our type, that kind of thing. We were like a young band that were doing a really weird thing, and even kind of putting the gear on and getting, like, dressing up for the gigs and all that sort of stuff. It was kind of like we were going so whole hog with it that it meant then that we would get people then messaging us who'd seen a video of us playing in a pub in Cavan or Monaghan or something like that. You'd get contacted by, there was a guy, a great guy, who's no longer with us, sadly, a fellow called Luke Gleeson. He used to promote club nights in Dublin and kind of garage rock club nights in Sweeney's on
Yeah,
Dame
yeah.
Dame Lane.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Sweeney's, yeah, that's not even
Yeah.
there. So uh he ran club nights in there, like this is like 20, again, like 2011, 2012, and
Sure.
he got us down to play at that. And then all of a sudden we're like 15 and we're playing in Dublin, and we're like getting these gigs, and people are seeing us and asking us, well, will you come and play this night because you're after doing so well here? And because we had that thing of, we were kind of prodigiously ahead of our uh, the normal development rate that we should have been at. You know what I mean? We kind of, for whatever reason, we accelerated past the school band phase.
Yeah.
Probably actually because, as you say, the inspiration of the toy show, and as you say, being on, actually the fact that, oh my God, we got on telly and we got on this, we got on that. And then it was kind of like, well, imagine if we really tried and we really put our heads down and really rehearsed and really got, and it coincided, as you say, with that kind of obsessive passion that comes as well with being a teenager getting into music. It's like, okay, well, it's all I'm kind of thinking about, daydreaming about, whatever it is, about like the set list, about the putting the show together, what sort of band will we be, what will we wear, what will we do, da, 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 da. So it was that kind of drive, I think, that then meant, as you say, we were playing in all these places underage, and it was like, you've heard other people say who end up in that position,
Yeah.
we'd be sitting in the van on Dame Street, and we'd be sitting in the van, and my dad would drive us up, and he'd, look after us, kind of thing, because, of the situation that was in it. And
Sure.
we'd be sitting in the van, just sitting in the van, listening to music and chatting and messing and joking, and then it'd be time to go in, and we'd go in to 15, 20 minutes beforehand, because we brought the gear in earlier in the day, make sure we were all, nothing was going to go awry on us. And then we
Sure.
were, yeah, and then we were away, that kind of thing. And then as soon as the thing was over, people would be patting you on the back or shaking hands or saying, oh, this is, whatever. And but then the next thing was, there'd be the tap on the shoulder, or so, my dad would get the
Time to
tap on
go.
the shoulder, and the lads have to get out of here. So I know we kind of got away from the question there about the TV stuff and all that, but
No, 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 absolutely. No,
but
I enjoy the organic flow of the conversation.
oh,
So
that's good.
wherever you want to go.
No, that's cool. That's cool. As long as you're cool too.
Dude,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So because of that, then it is funny then that you do end up in the situation where you do have at least one or two bits of film from every year of the band's existence, or which is also of your own existence. So you're kind of
Yeah.
tracking, and then because I mean, I probably would have gone years and years of, when you're doing it, you're not really taking that much of a notice of it, in the sense that you're thinking, it's like, sure, it's like taking a picture, somebody taking a picture of you and then showing you straight away, and you're going, I don't want to see a fucking picture of myself.
A
You know,
snapshot, if you will.
a snapshot, if you will, if you will, if we were
Sorry, I
exactly.
couldn't resist.
No, no, I'd be exactly the same. So exactly, well, you get a snapshot, as all these things are snapshots of different eras, and in the moment, you're kind of looking at a picture of yourself, and you're saying, "Oh, I look shit because it's a picture of me," and like you're more critical, or you're more thinking, "I don't want to see that," or "That would have just done that. Why would I want to watch it?" or all that sort of stuff. But even, let's say, I find nowadays, you know, let's say I might be sitting or talking to my girlfriend or something like that about something the band did and years ago, and then all of a sudden this kind of memory, we're able to go, oh yeah, sure. There's actually if you're interested, there's actually film of that,
Yeah.
which is kind of weird, and you can kind of then, you and people around you can step back in, and we go, oh God, you remember that time, and do you remember so and so looked like that, and Oh yeah, I remember that. Like even and we all have that thing. Oh, I remember that jacket. I wonder what or I remember I was really happy with my hair that day, or I was
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
sort of things
yeah.
like that. Or like whatever happened to that, whatever happened to them pair of shoes. That's kind of the main thing that you feel when you look back. And it is a really kind of very unique, lucky thing, I suppose. Well, not even suppose. It's a really great thing to have all that stuff, particularly rock ballast, because as I say, men like ourselves, we had that had that you know passion towards stuff like that, and like rock blast was this massive cultural totem pole in my life of like, bang, this is a huge thing that all that you know 95% of all the people I idolized have rock blast episodes devoted to them. So the fact that we didn't even know we were being filmed by rock blast until we turned up that day.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and it was
That's
just
a
like,
nice
oh,
surprise.
oh yeah, it was amazing, and it was a pretty small venue. Like we were playing in
Yeah.
it was Cologne, I think, was it, or somewhere like that. Uh,
Cologne, I think, yeah.
yeah, and it was a fairly small venue and just like kind of a club gig and all that. But next thing we'd seen lads were setting up bits of like a film crew kind of thing was coming in, and then like signing release forms to be like, you're okay for this to be shown on Rock Palace. We were like, fucking right, we're up, we're up for this being shown on Rock Palace.
You
You
go,
know.
I guess.
Mm. Absolutely. Because the funny thing is, I was probably watching, Elvis Costello or somebody on Rock Palast, watching the video on YouTube that morning, not
Yeah.
even expecting it. When the tour bus was pulling in, that'd be what I'd do to pass the time. I'd either be reading a book about, a music biography, or something that, somebody that was really I was digging at the time, or I was just mowing through as much kind of archive stuff as I could of bands I liked, or things, because you have all that time, to do it, when you're traveling and stuff. So that was a real. I think I particularly remember being excited that day because of that, and I was particularly happy. In hindsight, I actually think we were caught at our best at that time, because it was that kind of era where we were kind of on our initial buzz of ascent, and I think the set list, it was probably the best our set list ever was, and the most our the most ourselves we were as the band,
Hmm.
because in subsequent years, probably things, as all bands do, things get more complicated, and you start doing things that you wouldn't choose to do yourself, but you're compromising with labels, you're compromising with this, you're compromising with that, because of the world we found ourselves in, which wasn't really the world we were suited to. It was people who wanted us to bend over a bit into something that we weren't keen on. So then so you might see a gig from a few years later and you go, oh yeah, it's good, I like that, and yeah, that wasn't too bad, and happy enough with that, but you're kind of thinking, oh, I couldn't stand that fucking song, or I couldn't,
Yeah.
or I was never happy with that, or I never thought that worked out how it should have done. But I think that first Rock Palace thing we did, that's actually as kind of good a document of us at that time as you could get, that kind of thing.
No, and it's very interesting there. It's actually a good segue what you're talking about there with
Mm.
with kind of the major label thing, because obviously you guys were on EMI,
Mm.
and which it seems very fitting, I think, because like again, you're somebody who's very appreciative of kind of the history of the music, and I'm sure like
Mm.
as you guys were touring, there were probably certain venues you were hitting, certain festivals you were doing
Oh,
where
for
you're like,
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this.
Mm.
But your new project, obviously, Savage Hearts, I mean,
Mm.
is kind of a rejection that it's sort of
Yeah.
having full autonomy and kind of having a very conscious decision to kind of do things independently. Do you find that that was something that well, I guess I won't put words in, but
Oh,
just
go on,
if
yeah.
you could speak on like the difference between being a major label act and now
Mm.
being an independent act.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, being a major label act, when you're the kind of thing, you're the kind of, basically, I suppose the kind of proposition the Stripes initially was, and the kind of proposition of a band that I personally, only just speaking as myself now, that
Mhm.
I would be interested in, is fairly anathema to what most major labels will want, unless you completely and utterly flukily manage to, retain your identity, or your original principles, or whatever you're interested in doing, or your original vision can be retained while going through the major label mill. More power to you, fantastic. But I think the Stripes were always more geared in the world of and what I perceived it as, even at the time, even when we were 16, I personally perceived it as, we were influenced by, indie label thinking, like by labels again, like, things that had gone before us, like labels like Stiff Records and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We were totally besotted with all that kind of way of thinking and that kind of slightly anarchic, anti-establishment way of kind of doing things, putting out music, the irreverence, the kind of the whole attitude of it all was exactly what we were into and interested in. But that did get lost because I think we had this very strange thing where we were catapulted into the major music industry through no intention of our own at all, as in literally just being asked to do this gig, which led to this gig, which led to this gig, which led to us coming to London and major labels going kind of they actually went like totally ballistic over us in the initial there was a point, it was like late 2012, kind of autumn winter time, end of 2012, where we were told subsequently we were one of the most talked about bands in London in the music business, of like the hottest new properties, just because we'd managed to get to this stage where we had this really unique selling point. Being cold about it, or being what people were thinking really is that we had this selling point about us, that we had this kind of prodigious level of musical ability, or gelled as a band at a really unusual period compared to what most bands were like. We looked completely unlike any other band that was around at the time. We were doing a type of music that was completely unhip, untethered to any kind of movement or scene or anything that was happening at that time that would have been perceived as relevant to what the music industry was interested in. And obviously we had that, and we were of a certain age where we possibly, we looked a certain way. We probably, gelled well together visually and musically and all this sort of stuff. So there was all this kind of stuff that meant that the major labels went completely ballistic over us. And obviously, when you're in that situation, it's incredibly exciting, and it was an unbelievably exciting time, and it was a brilliant time, and it was probably the best time, really, as most people would say. It's like when you're doing those first forays into, we're playing in London, we're playing this, and you have that kind of excitement of, I wonder what's going to happen, I wonder what's going to come of this, I wonder what. And so we had that explosion kind of follow us there, and it gave us some fantastic experiences, and it gave us like a really I don't know. It meant our introduction to the whole music industry was really incredible, and we got to meet loads of our heroes, loads of people we really admired came to see the band, and we had this bit of showbiz about us, which people mostly the kind of band like a young band, normally a young band, if we had even been, let's say, as opposed to 16, 17, if we had been even 21, 22, there'd been a little bit of a less of a sheen on it, because it would have been more kind of like, well, yeah, so what? That's kind of normal, So for early 20s lads to be kind of carrying on like this, but it had that slightly unusual thing and a prodigious thing. So as I say, the whole first album experience really, I think actually was fantastic. It kind of really only became part of that major label mill, that kind of as you say, perverting the natural course of your own instinctive development, or where you'd like to see the band go, or it becoming like, there's like the old thing is like a camel is a horse designed by a committee, old phrase.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything had to be put through the camelization of, everybody from all these different areas in the most cliched way imaginable. Everybody wants to have their say, because then the first album, everything's kind of like up in the air. So it could be like, oh, the first album could come out and we had all this hype, buzz, whatever behind us. You could say, oh, maybe this album's going to be massive, huge #1 success, and then you're kind of riding the coattails of that. That kind of gets you through the next couple of years of, oh, you're the guys that had that massive first album, and you do X, Y, and Z, like TV appearances and touring, and everybody kind of thinks you're the man. Everybody's patting you on the
Hmm.
back. Or it could have been a flop, and then if it was a flop, you're either dropped or you're completely kind of taken in by the system and remolded to try and make you into success. So we had a pretty good run of it, because we had a top 5 first album in the UK and all that. But there was elements where even on the first album we wouldn't play the game, as in they were preoccupied, the label were preoccupied with things like BBC Radio 1. They were preoccupied with it hitting certain targets of hipness. And the thing
Hmm.
is, we developed a really big fan base and we had a really successful first album and we had a real like we made a big sort of splash impact here and in the UK and Europe and we were selling out our own tours in America, like we were playing clubs and stuff like that, but like I mean we had like a date sheet in it that was like sold out, sold out, sold out all the way
Yeah.
across America, which is in we were of the position of we never thought anything even remotely like this was ever going to happen. So we're like happy, we're as happy as you could be with it. We're buzzing. We're This is incredible. And the thing is, in that indie kind of punky indie DIY spirit, if somebody had said to us, you know, you have sold out a whole tour of America, lads. Now the venues are only 300 cap, but you're just going to keep plugging away, and that's your audience, and you can, it doesn't matter. It's like you're playing in these kind of sweaty rock and roll dives, but they sell out every time you come to town, and you have this, kind of loyalty of people and all that sort of stuff. We'd have been thinking, boy, this is the jackpot. This is incredible.
Yeah.
We had no um ambitions of this is today, like today Cavan, tomorrow the world, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
never
Yeah.
like, oh, we want to, win the Brit Award, or we want to do this, do that, and do the other, all these kind of like materialistic, show busy goals that people have in
No,
mind.
I think actually, sorry, sometimes that kind of like mid-range sort of
Mm.
popularity is sometimes the best because
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
do have a loyal fan base who's gonna stick with you through thick and thin. And I
Mm,
think sometimes when you get to that kind of like arena stage or that stadium
mm.
stage, it's like I don't know, people are into it for a while, and then if you can't keep reproducing the hits, they kind
Yeah,
of go on to the next thing where I think people
completely.
are I think there's like a lot of say like punk bands from the 70s and
Mm,
stuff who are still going
mm,
around now who are playing kind of smaller venues than perhaps they
mm,
would have,
mm,
but
mm, mm, mm.
people turn out and they sell them out. And I think that's sort of a
Exactly.
good position to be in where it's like I can go anywhere in the
Exactly,
world.
exactly. Yeah, oh, exactly, exactly. Like, I mean, even as a musician now, if you told me I would never ever play to a room bigger than three, four, 500 people, I'd be saying I'm the luckiest guy ever because that means I'm
Yeah,
still going to be playing to people. How amazing is that? Like, how
yeah,
amazing is it that it's your thing, that you're in a band and you're playing music you like and you're doing songs you like and you're having a laugh with the lads, whoever they might be, in
yeah,
the band with you, and people are turning up to watch it. That's like incredible. You know what I mean? And whatever the size of the place is, there's more people in the room than not in the room. That's
yeah.
like such an incredible, lucky, amazing thing. And that really was, and to really, and to this day still is the extent of the ambition with me. It's just like it's about the music you're making first and foremost. It's like, well, if this is giving you the buzz and you're really putting out stuff you're happy with, and you know that there's somebody is saying, "Oh, loving the new track, lad, it sounds great," or you put out, or there's people that are saying, you know, we love what you're doing and we'd like to put out an album and we'd like to do this with you, or we'd like to do that, and and it means that there's enough people in the world that will love and appreciate it. Not, well, even love is sounds egotistical to me. People that will appreciate it and enjoy it. Because I'm not looking to be loved either. That was never a that was never a
I'm not
driving.
seeking validation from my
No,
fans.
no, that was never they never had that kind of want of adoration from people or anything like that.
Sure.
Um, so that even just people who like it and dig it and appreciate it, I think that's like an amazing thing and a brilliant, exciting thing. And that's very much more, as you say, that indie spirit, indie label spirit, indie band spirit. Whereas, as you say, the reason I said something as ludicrous there, as mentioned in the Brit Awards, which is like I don't, it's not even doesn't even come into my universe.
Mhm.
Um, you might as well be talking about to me about soap opera award or something like that.
Yeah. I feel
Something.
the same even
Yeah.
about like the Grammys and stuff. Like I don't think that's like
Yeah.
indicative of necessarily like what's going to persist with people. I don't know. I
Mm.
think like what's going
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
stick with people. I actually remember, I don't know if you've ever read it, but I remember years ago reading the autobiography. I forget the guy's name, but the guy who founded the Brixton Academy.
All right.
And he was mentioning that. I always just thought it was a great quote where he was like,
Mm.
when I was booking bands to play the academy, I was never like looking at the singles chart. I was always looking at the albums chart because that's the
Mm.
people who
Mm.
actually go to see music
That's
and
yeah,
buy
yeah,
the full
yeah. That's
record.
yeah, exactly. That's the truer indication really of
Yeah,
what is and isn't happening. In the way, especially nowadays, like the singles in the chart is an indication of nothing.
yeah,
It's an indication. It's kind of more of an indication of what people who have no interest in music are listening to, whereas the albums chart is a little bit more. You know what I mean? Of a what would you call it? A yardstick to measure
yeah.
tastes, the musical climate by. But the what was I going to say? Yeah, so even to say mention the Brit Awards, to say I might as well have been talking about the TV Quick Award or something like that. But it's like you know uh, for all the relevance it has to me. But the people
Yeah.
that, let's say, in the Stripes era, the people that were in our firmament of, labels and people like that, they did have their eyes on that. So at the end of the
Hmm.
day, you have that nice relationship when you're on the rise, and then it's kind of like you can have, you're hip, and people think you're, the bee's knees, and you're the new thing, and you're the new band. And when it's that era, being on a major label is hypothetically great, because it's like, you know, everybody everybody takes your phone calls because you're the new trendy thing that's just been signed, and you're on the up and all sort of stuff. But if you reach, let's say we reached a peak, what I see as our peak, we were selling out places like Shepherd's Bush Empire and things like that in London, and you're kind of going, this is way overshot my wildest idea of where this band could ever have gone, and isn't this a fantastic thing? And as you say, the indie spirit, the punk spirit, there's people who are just, they get their audience, they get to their stage, and it's a case of maintaining your self, your music, your audience, your whatever. And if people are loyal to that, and if you keep doing stuff that people like, or stuff that's true to yourself, and that audience if you're doing whatever's true to you and that resonates with a certain number of people, you have that kind of, as you say, like you're saying about the punk bands and all that, you have that, like, more long, like the longevity of, you have your audience, you have your scene, people will come to see you. It's great. And if it gets bigger, brilliant. If it stays the same, fantastic. If it gets smaller, then you're kind of in a bit of a pickle. But, like, it's like, even if it gets smaller and then stays at that, as in, it's
Yeah.
like, even if you had a period where it's like, oh, we were kind of like a hipstery band that people liked for 18 months, and then it got smaller. But when it got smaller, it's stayed with that core audience, and
Consistent
and,
group.
and,
Yeah.
they, and they stayed with us, and you're able to function, you're able to be a band, you're able to fly to wherever and play a gig, and people will come, and it'll be do this and that and the other. That's all great to me. But then, let's say, the major label thing, that's where the clash then starts, because that's when people are thinking, well, okay, you're selling out, such and such a place, but we want you to be selling out 60,000 seats a night,
Yeah.
and charging this much money a night, and you're going to be played on Radio 1 in heavy rotation, and you're going to do all that sort of stuff. And, we, even at the time, were saying, you think this band's going to do that? Not, like, not fucking likely. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Looking at it in a really realistic, cold light of day, it's like, I don't know what band you're talking about, but I don't think we're going to manage that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
And
think that sense of like just wanting perpetual growth is just
mm,
unrealistic.
mm,
I think
mm,
even like bands who are at like an arena stage and a stadium stage, there's a lot of acts
yeah,
like I'm thinking of like acts like Pearl Jam or the Red Hot Chili
yeah,
Peppers
yeah,
or,
yeah.
or acts like that, and it's kind of like
Mm,
I don't know. I think people still go to that, and even though they will sell out arenas and sell out
yeah.
stadiums, it kind of gets to the point where people aren't really engaging with the music. They just want to hear Even Flow or they just want to hear
Absolutely.
Californication.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're looking at their shoes, or they're counting the songs until they get to that stage,
Yeah,
that moment
exactly.
they're looking for. And as you say, people are shuffling off for a piss, or they're getting drink
Yeah,
at the bar, or they're doing whatever. That kind of thing. So it's like,
definitely.
yeah, so we
Even bands who are
always,
kind of at sort of say like the stage of say mid-range, kind of like
mm,
let's say Olympia Theater kind of stage. Even
mm,
some of
mm,
those
mm.
acts kind of get to that stage too, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, we played the Olympia a few times, and we had fantastic, fantastic nights at it, and it was great. And that was kind of a peak at home in Ireland. The kind of home peak for me was those gigs at the Olympia that we would have done for a couple of years running. As in, it just was like, it was just a great, great occasion. It was great times and all that sort of stuff. But as you say, you don't have that. I don't know, people, I don't know what kind of person it is, has that kind of bloodlust in them of like, but if it was bigger, it'd be even better.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know what kind of person that is, whatever kind of Bono-esque person that is. But what you call it? I just can't
That's a
relate
good
to that.
example, actually. The
Yeah, 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 yeah.
one.
I think even when he's on stage, he's thinking, "I wish this gig was bigger."
Yeah.
So it's like, just, I don't know, whatever that rootless ambition is, or that kind of, like, striving for whatever. Um,
I will admit there is kind of, I guess, like a sexiness to when you see like the Rolling Stones playing Rio to 100,000 people,
Oh, for
but I just
sure.
don't
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
feasible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like, yeah, well, if we could wake up in the morning and if you could snap your fingers and say, we're all wildly successful and we've all got, no end of people to be interested in everything you do, and you have never have to worry about money and you have to do this and that and the other.
Yeah.
And if you could do that by which the Stones have more or less done, in the sense that they're of an era where they did follow their instincts and follow their nose and do the music that was true to them, with exceptions, I'm sure, along the line of slight of stumbling and kind of doing things that didn't work. But
Hmm.
you know, let's say you can't say Paul McCartney's become the most successful songwriter the planet can conceive of by not being true to his principles. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
He's just done himself. He's just done Paul McCartney, and everybody's
Yeah.
gone, that's the best thing anybody's ever fucking done. So it's
Yeah.
like, just by his natural talent, ability, instinct, genius, whatever. But the other thing of like taking what really is a minor band or a cult band or whatever, like we were happy, let's say the Stripes, we probably did attain a level of cult status, in the sense that we'd, as I say, we'd sell out all our tours and we'd do this and we'd do that and do the other. But the biggest room we'd be playing to might be 2,000 people, or you know 2,500 people was the big room. And there's quite literally thousands of bands at that status, as you say, that have great careers.
Yeah, like I said, I really do think that is kind of like the best status you can get to.
Oh yeah,
That's just my personal thing, and
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
it's
yeah. Oh,
because
for sure, for
I grew
sure.
up with like, kind of more alternative modes of music, but I do
Yeah,
think there is
yeah.
just something about playing those kind of venues. I don't know how you feel, but like
Mm,
for example, like when the Stripes would play a big festival like Rock am Ring, for example, I use that as an
yeah.
example because I whenever I see the Rock am Ring crowds, it's always just insane the amount of people there. How would you
It is
feel
insane. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
different to playing, say, in Olympia, or playing just like in terms of actually getting to interact with the crowd? I mean, did you
Mm,
find there was
mm.
a difference there? Because I don't know, I feel like when you're headlining and when you're playing these clubs, I mean, people are
Mm.
more into it when it's a festival crowd. They're appreciative, I'm sure, but it's like it is kind of like, well, yeah, but this they also just want to hear kind of everything. You know what I mean?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they're kind of taking all comers to a degree. That it's kind
Yeah.
of like, something like Rock am Ring was amazing, in the sense that you're never going to walk out in front of that many people. Well, first of all, you're never going to walk out in front of that many people on your own bat ever in your
Right.
life. That's just like accepting reality. And it's like, so this is mad. It's like we're going out as this kind of piddly little band. We're going out and we're like really like, you know, we were kind of, and you feel like a piddly little band definitely when you're doing gigs like that, but you're coming out and you're playing to however many tens of thousands of people it is. And that was a mad day because we were on quite early. We were on at like maybe, let's say, 2 o'clock in the day,
Hmm.
as the very junior band that we were, because that was on our first album, really, promotion trail. We just, the first album was out and we were doing all that stuff, and we wouldn't have really known what it was because we weren't really up on that scene. So we were just like, oh, Rock am Ring will be oh, we're going to Germany, doing a gig in Germany, sort of thing. And then you get there and you walk out, and as you say, there's tens of thousands, however many people there is. And I do remember it was an absolutely scorchingly hot day, and you literally could not see the end of the people in front of you, which I always found really strange. And I would never had stage fright or nerves or anything playing. But there was the only time anything would ever hit me like that would be because I was drumming in the Stripes and I'm playing the bass now at Seven Charts. So as the drummer in the Stripes, um, you'd be playing, and I'd suddenly realize you'd be playing a gig like that in front of that many people, and you'd kind of realize, holy shit, if I just stopped now as the drummer, if I stopped and like, threw the drumsticks up in the air and just started tapping them.
No one would even see it.
Well, yeah, but also that's the absolute bottom arse of the whole thing is gone in
Yeah.
front of that many people. Whereas if you're playing in front of hundreds of people, or even one, two, 3,000 people, which we did much more frequently, you're
Hmm.
kind of like, I can get my head around this. I can understand this. But it's kind of the other thing of playing to that enormous amount of people, and kind of similar thing happened. We supported the Foo Fighters a couple of times, well, Slane, and obviously in Ireland, and then we did the Stadium of Light in Sunderland as well with them.
Hmm.
And that would be a time where you'd be in an enormous stadium like that, and you'd be kind of thinking, I'm this little small little component in this vast space. And that'd be the only time I'd ever get in my head about what I was playing or what I was doing, because you'd be thinking, almost on an existential level, you'd be thinking, I'm hitting these drums, these hitting these things, and as I'm doing it, that sound is being relayed to all those tens of thousands of people,
Yeah.
and anybody that's paying attention is paying attention because of the sound of me doing this stupid thing that shouldn't really matter. You know, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And
I get
yeah,
what you're saying.
so you'd nearly be more likely to go on a little mini existential spiral in your head of what is actually happening here, when you're playing in front of that many people, and I don't
No,
know.
I'm really fascinated by that kind of
Yeah,
mentality because like when you see
yeah,
like club bands kind of playing those big stages, I'm always like, oh, I wonder
mm,
what that's like. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's really
yeah,
fascinating to
definitely. Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. And I just say, yeah, and especially because we were the kind of band that would be best observed in a really kind of sweaty club venue sort of place.
Yeah.
And most of the music that I have made in my life, and I'm currently making, and probably realistically ever intend to make, is kind of that kind of sweaty rock and roll garagey stuff that's best observed up close or in a decent sized venue of people, can be immersed in it, and it's an immersive thing. Whereas there's something so well, let's say you're literally when you're playing again, unless you're in the Foo Fighters or something like that, where as I say you're doing it every day of your life, and you will have tens of thousands of people who know exactly who you are, exactly what songs you're playing, exactly the words, or they're going to sing back at you, or some whatever that maybe does to people's egos or mentalities or whatever. Coping thing you have with that. But like I found when we did that, as I said, the new kids on the block kind of vibe in those situations, as I say, you're so not immersed that genuinely, well, you're not thinking about it. You're actually going, as I as I was saying there, me personally anyway, you're going on this little funny existential thing, being like, I can't believe this is actually happening. This is really weird,
Hmm.
So that's probably that's probably a sign from above that oh, I'm not actually immersed in this here, because
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about what if I, like, as I say, what if I went to hit the cymbal at this really crucial moment and missed? Or what if I did something really stupid right now? And it's as you say, it's not like a nerves thing, but it's like a kind of a outer body thing. It's kind of a funny way of experiencing playing in front of people, Like the Arctic Monkeys tour was a little bit like that as well. We supported the Arctic Monkeys, and that's again, and it's like, if you get offered, like as I say,
Yeah, of course.
if you get
I'm
offered the
not gonna
sport,
say no.
yeah, if you get offered the sports out of the Arctic Monkeys, either it ever in like in either whether it's us or whether any band on the planet of any
Yeah.
kind, if you get offered the tour of Sport Arctic Monkeys, my humble advice would be, do take it, do it, because it'll do you the power of good. It'll really have an excellent effect on your standing in your field, and it will be a really big buzz and boost. And it was a fantastic. I would have said that whole tour was a fantastic experience, but there always was a slightly funny vibe to the gig, because it's like, obviously you're the underdog because you're the support act as well, and you're the support act that most people won't be knowing. And we were lucky that as well, because we did have a little bit of a profile from the first album. We did have a percentage of the audience that knew us and a percentage of people who came to enjoy us as well. But you still have this really funny feeling of, maybe because again you're the support band, you're not the one, you don't have the big show, you don't have the big massive A and M behind you in the
Yeah,
set.
yeah.
Doesn't relate to you. That's not your that's not your backdrop. It's not your set. It's not your rig.
Mhm.
The lighting man hasn't been cued to your set to do all the changes and
Yeah,
stops.
I've noticed that actually when a lot
So,
of like
so yeah,
opening backs come on, they
exactly,
just have like
exactly.
very, you can see them trying to kind of get the rhythm of the songs and
Oh,
stuff.
literally, yeah, you can tell the light man, you can literally see him getting to grips with it and trying to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah.
You can say, oh, he's probably chuffed with himself there when he stopped it at the right point. But you have all that going on, and you're trying to get to grips with things like the monitors, in-ear monitors, all these things that you'd never used before. And the whole overall thing is a fantastic experience. And by the end of it, we definitely were in a groove, and we definitely did have some great gigs on that tour. But it's always a funny feeling because, as you say, probably if the big AM behind you stood for your band, you're gonna feel a little bit more pumped up. Whereas
Yeah.
when you're doing something like that, you're a little bit like, this is just so strange. This is so not what I'm used to the experience of a gig being in a way. You know what I mean? And even that thing of we all, because we're like again only four of us, and we always played really tight on stage. You're huddled together, but there's huge amount of stage over there and huge amount of stage over there
Yeah.
behind you as well. So you're a little bit
I remember Kurt Cobain talking about that. He was like, we like
yeah,
to be like waving to Chris all the way over there.
exactly. So you have it is like that feeling. Yeah, yeah. So you're a little bit like, and you end up huddling together on the stage. You end up playing close together because you're trying to recreate that feeling. If you're that kind of band that, the vibe comes from you playing really closely and interacting, then you're doing whatever you can to try and accommodate that or make that happen, And as I say, it did result. We had some fantastic gigs on the Arctic Monkeys tour by the end when we were getting used to, not by the end, but I mean like after probably the initial kind of shock factor of, God, never played like this before.
Yeah.
Like we thinking like, things like having in-ear monitors in, which we never used before. You'd finish the song and then there'd be this kind of vacuum of, you know what I mean, of your ears are literally like that.
Yeah.
So you're only hearing select things. You're not hearing the room. You're not hearing, you know, somebody coughing, or you're not hearing somebody doing something else. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
the controlled aspect of that. So it is a funny one. It is a very, very funny one. Like um, trying to relate different gigging scenarios to each other,
Yeah.
Because then let's say you could do a festival and you could do like a tent. I like at a festival, we've played on main stages like that, like Rock Am Ring and stuff. And then you could play in a tent then somewhere else. And even like a big top tent, a pretty sizable one, you can get a vibe going. You can get a kind of an excitement going that kind of mirrors something like what you've experienced before, where people are
Yeah.
moshing and going crazy and all that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I noticed a lot of
anyway.
a lot of new festivals around Ireland are kind of
Mm.
trying to replicate that. There was recently a
Mm.
series of gigs at the Galway airport, as well as Fairview
Yes,
Park in
yes.
Dublin and places like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
they're
yeah,
trying to replicate. I think there's something really unique and interesting about those kind
yeah,
of tents,
yeah,
or
yeah,
like
yeah,
an
yeah,
electric picnic or something like that. It's
yeah,
really good. I
yeah.
actually at electric picnic, not to be too hipstery, but I tend to prefer the second stage.
Oh, I get you completely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. And I'd think exactly the same thing. You probably like, I mean, I'm not really much of a festival attender myself,
Mm.
as in I've mostly been at festivals because I'm playing at them. But if I was to attend, if someone was saying your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to uh, attend Electric Picnic and have a good weekend, you probably wouldn't, I wouldn't go near the main stage, I'd say, or I wouldn't go
Yeah.
near, I'd say there's probably way more interesting stuff going on all over in the more unexpected sort of areas. Or if you
Yeah,
knew,
it's fun to explore that. I think that's the best thing about festivals, just like kind of
yeah,
exploring the grounds and just seeing what's on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. And I've always thought that. And sure, it's like they say about Glastonbury. It's like the TV coverage of Glastonbury is like the most inaccurate depiction you could get of
Yeah.
it, because it's such
Yeah,
an
because they want the most bombastic, kind of showy,
yeah,
something
yeah,
that's like
and they
going to
want more.
attract people who are flicking through the channels.
Exactly. They want the people that they want the non-committal audience who are flicking
Yeah.
past, as you say, and go, "Oh, is that so and so?" I'll put it back and see it for 5 minutes. Whereas there are people we know from, who we've done gigs with in the past, like let's say even with the Savage Hearts. Actually, we did a gig. We did our first gigs in London this last summer gone by. We played in Gaz's Rock and Blues Club in Soho, which is a fantastic place. It's like they say, it's like one of the vibiest kind of club nights in London, really. And it's been running in the same place for decades and all that. And it's Gaz Mail, the guy who runs it. He's the son of John Mail and the Blues Breakers, Eric Clapton and all that sort of stuff. That was
Yeah.
his father. And Gaz is a legend. He's such a cool guy. And he makes his own great music with his own bands and all this sort of stuff. But he has, for example, a whole Gaz's Rock and Blues section of Glastonbury. He runs a tent and he runs his own little area of that kind of stuff going on. And I'd say, if I was going to that, I wouldn't hear sight nor sound of any of the big names that'd be playing, unless it's someone that really strikes a chord with you. If it was just another random bill of big acts, I probably wouldn't even leave the Gazmail area of Glastonbury if I was there. That kind of thing.
Absolutely.
If I had
Absolutely.
to enjoy it, or similar things like that. I know there's, you know, like people who devote, you know, their own vibe, their own little integral piece to what makes something like that what it is. And I think any of the Glastonbury heads or the festival heads that you hear talking, they say, well, that's the real festival, is the people like that, and I very much would be of that way of thinking as well. Um,
when it comes to your new project,
Mm.
we touched on it, the Savage Arts. I want to I want to make sure you get this plugged. So,
Oh, sure,
Savage
sure.
Arts is your new project.
Yes.
You're working with Blowtourch Records, who are
Mm, mm, mm.
a great independent label out of
Sure,
Galway.
yeah.
I honestly think they're probably like the kind of independent label in Ireland right now in terms of like I think that's probably where everyone would want to go.
Yeah, yeah,
Is your
yeah.
new single coming out with them? I wasn't quite sure about that.
Oh yeah, well, I suppose at the moment the single is it's a digital only release for the moment, which is a
Yeah,
bit of a thing. We still are very associated with Blowtorch, and we still work with them and still have a great relationship with them. They are a fantastic label, as you say. Richard, who runs it,
great
uh,
guy.
he's a great guy. He's a really great guy, and he gives such a brilliant platform to bands and stuff like that of that kind of proper, as you say, proper underground subculture, whatever you want to call it, kind of
Yeah.
music and bands and stuff. So I mean, like. Definitely, we're still working with them and we're still doing stuff with the guys because I'm very actually intrigued because again, you're probably more in the know than me about something like that, that it's the label in Ireland at the moment. Like something
Yeah.
like that, I'm very excited, not just
That's my editorializing, by the
yeah, yeah, of
way.
course, yeah, yeah, yeah. But the fact that people like yourself are saying that, that's obviously exciting. I find that exciting because it's like, we're in that kind of world, but also
Yeah.
for excited on behalf of Richard because he's such a great guy and
Well,
he's
I
so
honestly think
hard,
it's
you know?
like you mentioned earlier, Stiff Records. I really think it is kind of
Yeah,
like our Stiff Records of like the modern
yeah,
era.
yeah,
Like it
yeah,
really is like it is just
yeah.
that kind of like just such a great portfolio of just like varied artists.
And given people, and I think that's when I first met Richard late last year, and kind of we literally talked about just whatever we were up to, and I kind of just was telling him about working on the project, and he was interested in it, and we were talking about doing something that was really really grassroots, because as I say, for all the reasons I went into copious
Yeah,
detail about before.
yeah.
A lot of that kind of yeah kind of over all that stuff I overshared about
No.
um definitely whatever I would do now and whatever I like doing now and would intend to do now is very much it's very much flying in the face of where where I see, to be honest, where the Stripes kind of natural course of development kind of got derailed in my view,
Mhm.
as in I came out of the Stripes saying there was fantastic there was some fantastic times that we had some great experiences. But if I was doing it, it's like that thing of if you had your time over again, would you do it differently or would you change anything? I'm very unromantic. I'd say I'd change everything. I'd like, as in you kind of go like, you know, you learn so much from those experiences and you'd say, well, I'm not fucking doing that again. I'm not getting involved with that kind of
Yeah.
area again. I'm not doing this, that, and the other. So like, the indie label thing, the grassroots underground scene was always my bag. Um, and that's definitely talking to Richard and then getting to work together and do the singles together and stuff like that. Um, it's very much it's so true to that spirit. You know what I mean? Where people are doing things for all the right reasons and giving
Yeah.
people the plug because they like it and they want it. So I mean, like they want to give it the platform. Like Richard, that's what he said to me. Really, that was very attractive. Was that he kind of sees it as he's giving people a platform, giving people a jumping off point for whatever is to come. That kind of thing or whatever.
And not dictating their course because like I mean as
Mm.
I was mentioning I mean just the artists the repertoire is so varied that you can't have like
Yeah.
the blowtorch sound so to speak.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you could probably have, so many different things going on at the same time that are putting out totally different vibes, but he's not being it's as you say, it's a totally non-discriminatory to whether somebody wants a project to whether you want this to be the start of something that you have big grand ambitions for, that's up to you. But if you're someone who sees things as being very curated and very like, as I say, I do things like this when I want to do them, how I want to do them, you know it's just it depends on whether they float his boat or not. That's kind of the main thing, and that he's a proper record man in that way. You know what I mean? That it's like
Yeah.
that's
Well,
the
that's
kind
the
of
big thing for independent artists who are releasing it.
mm,
Getting stuff on vinyl is so expensive and so difficult. I mean,
absolutely,
even if
absolutely.
you have the money, like I've talked to other artists who said like, well, it's just like a matter of like finite resources. So even if you
Mm,
have the money, it's just like, well, there could be a backlog of like 6 months before you can get a
exactly.
record out.
That was actually the point I was about to make. I was saying if you do get in touch with Preston Plants or whoever you want to get in touch with, they'll say, oh yeah, we'll have it ready by March 2027. It's
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
it's that kind of banging your head against the wall thing if you want to do that. And so the fact that Richard can, he's got the attitude that the people that do what he's doing, he has the attitude that you need to have, that kind of thing, that it's like,
totally.
doing it for all the right reasons, and then it kind of puts you in a really nice bag then with the people you're also, what I mean, you're kind of in that kind of free independent kind of spirit, which is really good. So definitely, like in terms of us working together, definitely with the single, just for literally for time constraints and a few other things, we just decided we do this single as like it's a one digital track release, because we had kind of slightly grander, I suppose, kind of things that went with the other two, but this one, just because of the time of year that's in it, and I think we wanted to keep the productivity and the regular release, and that's another thing. Myself and Richard were very much on the same boat, or it's on the same wavelength. Uh, about, you want a band, you don't want to release a single and uh, put all your resources into one big single release and then kind of lose your bottle and not do anything for 18 months after that. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? When you're doing it, you want to keep doing it. You want to keep that momentum coming. You want to keep that content, momentum, consistency, all that sort of stuff. You want to keep all that, as a part of the excitement of a new project. So like the the Silver Locket single, it's one digital track for now, but we have plans, or we're kind of tentatively looking at plans for after Christmas. There might be like an EP, or we might do something that kind of combines the digital single with new stuff and do a vinyl, do some sort of release, or along those lines. But it's just tentative plans at the minute. But there will be a release of some sort, that kind of thing.
totally. Before I talk about the single, I just want to actually ask about the band itself. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
this is like, yes, this is your obviously your new project, Savage Hearts. I
yeah,
believe
yeah.
if I'm getting the chronology correct, this was
Okay.
after Zen Arcade. You
Yep.
had a bunch of songs during the COVID pandemic that you had kind of lined up, and you just wanted to do stuff with. This is a
Mm,
very organic project. I was
absolutely.
wondering, on the one hand, like I think the Irish independent music scene
Mm.
has grown exponentially within the time frame, say between the Stripes and disbanding in
Oh,
2018 versus
for,
now.
for
Do you
sure. Yeah, yeah.
how do you find kind of competing in this new market, and generally how do you find the Savage Hearts kind of differs from any of your previous projects?
Mm, Um, well, I think it differs from previous projects because a lot of it is my own undiluted voice, which
Hmm.
is very unusual in the sense that, in the Stripes days, we were all only finding our feet, creatively speaking, and we were really kind of having, like teenagers who are just getting into making music and developing as musicians. We were only kind of finding where our voices were, or where our kind of strengths were and everything like that. So I mean, you know, early Stripes days, I would have had more of an input into the arranging and the sort of like, what would you call it, the window dressing of the songs, more so than the actual content in the early days, just because, we all developed at different times. And then myself and Pete, the bass player in the Stripes, we co-wrote a lot of songs then for the later Stripes albums, like the third album in particular. Third album, we did about half of it really, and we were really chuffed with it. And that was a big development on my front into the more legit songwriting sense. And then, I suppose all of a sudden you hit that vein, or you find what kind of angle you have as a songwriter based on your previous kind of things. You're thinking, well, again, it's like you look back and you say, well, I think that bit worked and that bit worked, but no, that bit's making me cringe now looking back on that, and the other
Sure.
bit, you know what I mean? I
No, I get
mean,
what you're saying.
so I think this now, it was kind of the first time in me life, really, my creative life, that I had an album plus worth of songs that I deemed playable, good enough to do, sort of
Yeah,
thing. You know what I mean? Like normally you're
absolutely.
thinking, you always have like through them teenage years, you're like, well, I have one or two, or I have, I have maybe I have ideas that I'm happy with, and I have other ones that are making me think, oh, I'm just banging my head against the wall here.
Sure.
So, I think it was the thing about the COVID thing. I think Zen Arcade, for various reasons, we kind of couldn't continue with that project just because people's personal reasons and stuff like that. It wasn't to be. It wasn't the right time for some of us as it was for others. I was kind of raring to go in some way, shape, or form. I didn't know what way it was, but I kind of realized that was like late 21, early 22, that, well, I kind of have a lot of stuff coming together here, and a lot of ideas, and a lot of kind of potential sort of I don't know. Yeah, potential. Yeah, just potential ideas, potential material, potential kind of everything of, even though I'd been in a band since I was 12 and we'd done all these things and, been around, I'm still walking around thinking, God, if I was in a band, I'd love to do that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It hadn't changed that kind of, as you say, like the passion thing we talked about earlier on, that passion of just the passion for the band, man,
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, was totally undiluted. It was just as strong as ever. And I was still fantasizing about, God, if I'd love to be in a band that did this, or I'd love to be in a band that had that, or I'd love to be, instruments that the Strypes never used, or arrangements that we never did, or types of songs that we didn't get touching on, or or even a return to certain things that I thought, yeah, that was kind of like the beginning of something. But now,
Right.
if I was to do something like that now as a more developed person, I would like to I do it like this, that kind of thing. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
combination of all that stuff really, and I just was like thinking, well, I'm not going to not be in a band. That's absolutely unthinkable. And
It's all you know.
yeah, yeah, it really is all I know and all I've ever known. And I mean, I was in a band in my head years before I was in a band in real life, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been in the Beatles and the Monkees and everybody
Yeah.
at
Well,
various times in my life in my head,
dude,
you know.
that's the attractive thing I think about
Mm,
independent music is that like
mm,
if you're just like listening to kind of stadium rock bands, it's like I don't know, it just seems so unattainable. But when you're looking
mm.
at bands just kind of like playing like clubs and bars, going around tour like successfully touring like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
spots,
yeah,
especially in
absolutely,
Europe, because every like kind of major city in Europe has some kind of spot you can play. I think that's like really the attractive
absolutely,
thing. It's just these
absolutely.
like little clubs and so attainable.
For sure, for sure. And I actually think, yeah, you have that thing. You're totally right. And I would have found that with Stiff Records and bands like Dr. Feelgood and stuff like that. It was always
Yeah.
like, I could do my own version of that. I won't be as much of a badass legend as I think these people are, or I won't
Yeah,
look, or my hair will never look as good as his does, or something like that.
sure.
But it's more along the lines of this could happen in its own way. And so that's actually the thing, as you say, with Savage Hearts, you're totally right with the chronology that like I'd also never put a band together from scratch of lads, because it was just such a kind of a natural thing when we were younger, all in school and all that sort of stuff. So that was also part of the challenge as well, that it's like, well, I kind of have my what would now be my kind of my idealized I have my idealized version of what if I started a band, if I was the one guy from day one that was like, this is the idea, this is the name, this is the vibe, it goes like this, and now I have to find the people that are up for doing it and collaborating and stuff like that. That was a
Was that
first.
difficult to get people to come along, or was it easy?
Um, well, I'm feel very lucky with how relatively easy it was, if you know what I mean, in a sense that
Sure.
we've ended up with a really, really good lineup of really great musicians and great fellas and
Because
great
it is a
there.
packed band. Because like I know sometimes like that can be often be especially now because like I think as
Mm.
you were kind of mentioned when the Stripes started, you guys were teenagers. So, but
Yeah,
the interesting because I was in teenage bands too, and like
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
interesting about like even then it can be kind of difficult even to triangulate. Even though
Oh,
everyone has the
absolutely,
same
yeah.
schedule, everyone's just on the same secondary school level schedule. But when you
Yeah.
have people who have different jobs and different paths and
Mm,
different careers and different commitments, be it familial commitments or career commitments or whatever, or
mm,
even like sometimes people are playing in several bands. It's
mm.
to get like a full band together as an adult
Oh, for
is
sure. Yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
unenviable.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Oh, it is. It really is. And it was a kind of a long time, relatively speaking, I think, to get it into the right sort of shape. I mean, like probably from late 2021, when it became apparent that things were going to be kind of changing. Late 2021, really to the start of this year was the trial and error process, of doing bits and bobs and trying to figure things out, and then playing yourself in and trying. We had a couple of different attempts at lineups and stuff like that. Um, the first lineup that we put together, it's only me that's left from that lineup. So
Okay.
so it kind of was, it really was just trying and trying and seeing who was out there and meeting with people and jamming and working stuff out. And in the meantime, I kind of was thinking, well, if I have everything in place on an editorial level, if you know what I mean, if I create this
Yeah.
project and I have as much of it, as much of the lines or as much of the kind of intent of the project kind of summed up and delineated as I can from the get-go, then maybe the more it'll become obvious whether someone is interested in getting involved or is the right person to get involved, or you know what I mean. So like there was like
I get what you're saying.
kind of
It's not just like a nebulous thing. It's like, no,
yeah,
it's an
yeah,
actual
yeah,
thing
yeah,
you can
yeah.
join.
Yeah, kind of a little bit like that. It was a little bit like, well, this is the kind of club we're trying to
Sure.
create here. And it's kind of like,
No one wants to say, put your money in my idea of a bank.
yeah, exactly. And it's like this idea that could, depending on the variable outcomes, be a thing. It was
Yeah.
like, well, this is kind of the bang, bang, bang. This is the look of it. This is the vibe of it. These are the songs, stockpiling the demos, working on a kind of a kind of an imagery that would go with it or a vibe that would go with it. And as I say, 22 and 23, the years were mostly spent um trial and error, jamming with loads of people. I was very like really lucky with like the lads that have come on board now, like Dara, the lead singer, lead guitar player. Met him first, and me and him just randomly with like for one reason or another, he ended up just messaging me saying, if you know of anybody that is doing any bands, please let them know. and,
And
and
you're
you
like,
know,
oh, I'll pass it on to myself.
yeah, exactly. He was looking for something in the same way that I was as well. And he's an amazing guitar player, great singer, great all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And he was looking around for something. He obviously had something to be like, I want to he wanted a fresh kind of start, fresh project. I was looking in that same line as well. And as I say, he initially thought, well, he could pass it through me, and if I knew anybody that was putting the band together, and I was, as you say, I passed it on to myself immediately. I, ASAP, I was like,
Yeah.
must get myself to reply to Dara as soon as I possibly can. And, we were on
Sending
a
yourself
very,
a text message.
literally, yeah. Schedule a call with myself. And we got together again, had a couple of jams, literally like two of us with the guitars and all that. And it was a really great feeling of, oh, he's on that wavelength, I'm on that wavelength. We're both kind of looking to do something in a really kind of no messing around, no bullshit. You want to either
Yeah.
do it or you don't want to do it. That kind of thing.
Right.
And he had that about him. He had the kind of get up and go and the interest and all that. And same now with um Eugenio, who plays everything really. I thought I played a good few instruments, but Eugenio is like classically trained. He can play, like, he plays the sax with us mainly. And that was another thing I was really keen to do, something like totally different from the Strypes, to have like kind of greasy 50s rock and roll meets a bit of like Roxy music, Ian Dury, the Blockhead style madness sax in there. It's such a kind of that's a totally new sound that I was never always wanted to play with, always wanted to have a go with, but and have as part of the textures in there. But only now that we're getting to do it with this project. Again, it was just a lucky thing that we happened to meet through the local scene just around Cavan, and he's from Italy originally, so it was really fluky that he was hanging around and playing
Just
with some
destiny.
people. Yeah, really, literally met in a pub at a jam session, and he plays sax, trombone, guitar, bit of keys. He's like he's all over the map, and he like
Always get a multi-instrumentalist.
absolutely, yeah, and he really is one, and he can read what the notes are and everything. So it's like,
Oh well.
if another brass player needs to be given a chart or another thing,
Yeah.
he's your man to do it. That kind of thing. Where the rest of us are trying to say, it's you put your thumb up there and you do this, kind of,
I think this is a G. I think the
yeah,
third fret.
exactly, in the most kind of unschooled way imaginable. So like,
But I
yeah,
think that's beautiful though. Like I do love that kind of marriage because I think you get really interesting sounds when you have that kind of marriage of people who are
mm,
self-taught and people who are formally taught. I always
yeah,
just think it's
mm,
interesting when those two kind of people come together and someone has an idea for a song that's very instinctive and very intuitive, and then someone's able to
mm.
actually kind of put their education, I guess, onto that, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure. And you can kind of, yeah, it's like putting it into another kind of formalized sort of thing. It kind of gives it a bit of a legitimacy or something like that. When
Sure.
it's one of the funniest things actually when we've been working on songs and even some of the tracks we've released this year so far. Like, and I've seen Eugenio's made up like saxophone charts for himself
hmm
just to make sure he has the part exactly down. And seeing a
Yeah.
song you've written with sheet music kind of filled out below it is a
Oh
really
well, yeah.
it's a really funny thing. and the fact that he's just done it on an app on his phone is that
You feel like
that's
Mozart.
that's just, yeah, that's a small detail that
Yeah.
it looks so official.
I want to finally just talk about your new
Yeah,
song
yeah.
that's coming out. Yeah, it's called Silver Locket, as you mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
In the press release for this single, you mentioned that this is probably your favorite single that you've released so far.
Mm, mm, mm,
As I was
mm.
listening to it, here's a weird point of comparison. I don't know if you get this a
Okay,
lot,
yeah,
but
yeah,
when I
go
was
for it,
listening
go
to
for it.
the song, it was reminding me of the band Rocket from the Crypt. I don't know if that's
Oh wow, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Okay, right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's who invoked for me.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about it and just kind of like what the song kind of means for you, I guess.
Totally, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's a very interesting reference point because I wouldn't be overly familiar with Rocket from the Crypt, but
Yeah.
I do know Rocket from the Tombs, if you know
Okay.
them. And I think that they're kind of Rocket from the Crypt are named after Rocket from the Tombs
Yeah.
or something like that. So
Again, it all just comes back.
totally, and they actually were a bit of an influence on what I thought I'd like to do with the Savage Hearts. That'd be completely different from the Stripes. It's that kind of bring way more of a kind of I suppose a psychedelia, neo psychedelia kind
Yeah.
of kind of sinister garage rock psychedelia into proceedings, and be more experimental with the tones and textures and that sort of way, that in a way that the Stripes never was. It was a little bit more straight, call it as you see it kind of stuff. The Stripes was,
Hmm.
whereas I think with the Savage Hearts, part of the intent is to kind of bend the format a bit more and bring in different textures and different ideas, and like, as I say, I've always loved that kind of neo psychedelic sort of vibe, and the kind of like Rock from the Tombs actually they're really like hard to listen to recordings of that kind of like mangled psychedelic punk freak out,
Yeah.
thing, fuzzy mania. Like, I love that. I think that's just incredibly exciting, and would like to, if you can't quite capture the kind of spirit of total mayhem that those things can invoke sometimes, you want to at least kind of capture a bit of the spirit of it anyway, and
Yeah.
there's a bit of a spirit running through some of the Savage Hearts tracks that we have in the pipeline. And I think I like Silver Locket the most because it kind of marries a little bit of everything in there like that. It's a couple of weird sounds, weird textures. It's got a bit of a doomy sort of, it's a the guitar riff is very pessimistic
Yeah.
in its texture. It's that kind of bow now now. It's all kind of like, kind of angular notes, as I say, kind of sort of doomy, fuzzy, garagey sounding guitar riff, but it's got a kind of melody to it. And I mean, I'd be well. It's also the first track to give everybody in the band their due as well. I never mentioned Luke, who's the drummer as well, which is a very funny thing for me because halfway through kind of putting together what the project would be, I kind of decided to make the jump to the front line from being the drummer
Hmm.
since the beginning of my musical life. So it's the first time I've officially been a different instrument, in the
Yeah.
band to what
Is
I.
that difficult then? Because you don't want to be like micromanaging him, but
Exactly, exactly. But that's why he was such a great, Luca himself was such a great find and a great lad and a great musician to play with because there's no micromanaging going on. You know what I mean? That's the thing that you worry about as someone who's already a drummer. You kind of think, oh, I'm just going to be an absolute dose here now and just, you know, you know, like you say, micromanaging or just getting on him all the time, getting on his case about, oh, even if you mean it in a well-meaning way,
true. No.
you could end up becoming, it's like the McCartney and George Harrison,
Hmm.
get back, I'll play whatever you want me to play a moment, so it's like you don't, that's the last thing you want to be doing. But Luke, he's got a really great ground, and he's kind of from more of a kind of a real out and out like hard rock, heavy metal background for his playing, and I think that actually suits perfectly because what I actually even thought that before we even got together in the band. I thought, you actually want like a kind of a metal drummer or someone who's going to really absolutely, you know, lay into it basically. And it's like I
Yeah.
love that idea of taking a song that's got one style to it. So let's say a song like Silver Locket, there might be a little bit of a sensitivity to the melody of it, but you don't want to be doing the obvious thing and play sensitively for the sensitive bit or hard for a hard bit. You want to kind of like, it's like that thing of like, you know, the power has to always be there. So it was kind of like on some of the singles so far, I actually had played drums on some of the tracks and stuff like that because we were still kind of juggling different sort of drummers and lineups and stuff like that. But
Right.
this single is actually everybody's like finally slotted into. There's nobody like doubling up on any instruments. We're all actually
Right.
doing our role in the band. You know, like I do the little synth bit in the middle, but apart from that, everybody's kind of kind of really laying into their kind of the thing that they're kind of bringing to the table is what we bring on stage and in the band as a whole. So that was interesting, and uh, Luke was the man for the job there because he kind of just mowed into it with the kind of spirit that you want, of like
Totally.
spirit and the energy and stuff.
That's
That
the other thing too. Like I do think like having people from kind of like very different backgrounds makes music a lot more interesting too. Where it's
Oh,
like,
completely. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Like we all have big strands in common, but we're all bringing something unique at the same time, I think, which is
yeah.
really good. And again, a very
Especially
lucky.
for a project like this, which is so kind of
Eh,
not genre inclined, you know.
Exactly, exactly. So you have like, and again, like, Eugenio, he'll bring in his kind of classically trained knowledge for, sax lines and different kind of, the more kind of theoretical side of it. And Luke has the kind of metaler kind of punch
Yeah.
that I always thought I wanted because you want it to be like, especially with that garage rock thing, you need there to be a. We'll talk about rocket from the tombs. You need to rocket up your arse to to kind of really give to really sell the kind of thing. Because if somebody kind of says, it's a kind of a thing where if you're playing somebody a track and you'd say, uh, this has a bit of a such and such a feel, or so you could be listening to something and you say, oh, this is kind of a '60s vibe, and then
Mm,
someone's going to play what they think a '60s vibe is, but you don't want that. You want the inspiration can be from that place, but the playing needs to be of now. It needs to be of its own
yeah,
thing. So it's like play this kind of maybe '60s psychedelia inspired song like you're playing any other contemporary form of music and with the
absolutely.
power of any, let's say, any contemporary stoner or metal or anything like that. You want it to have the exact same nowness, and you don't want people
Yeah.
to go, oh, I'm going to play this like it's a Donovan song or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You,
no, absolutely. Because you
you
go
know,
back to those like 60s music and like there's like, just like you hear like the buzz of electricity, or you hear
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
obviously the
yeah.
tape kind of wearing, or, a lot of those kind of like bands who are recording music really cheaply would, for the
Mm.
drums would just have a single overhead mic and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, for
And I,
sure,
I
for
do think
sure.
it's important not to, like, I remember I forget the guy's name, but he was talking about, I went to a lecture in my college one time about,
Mm,
punk aesthetic kind of, and he
mm,
was saying like the
mm.
thing is like people like photocopies and Xerox things because that was the technology available. If they had Photoshop, they would use
They would have
it.
done it. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
And it's like again,
because I'm partly responsible. With my website, I kind of like a lot of the aesthetics of old fanzines, so
yeah,
I
of
kind of
course,
try
yeah,
to
cool.
replicate that a little bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
even
yeah.
even I'm kind of like, well, this is a bit
Yeah.
kitschy.
Oh, but I get it though, because you want the spirit of it. You definitely want the
Yeah,
spirit, and if a vibe inspires you, then I think it's definitely valid to kind of adopt certain, you know what I mean, certain principles or
yeah,
certain ideas. But it's like that, as you say, it's like if I was going back to the '60s psychedelic idea, it's like, well, the people in the '60s were, even if they're doing something that they think is like a '50s rock and roll thing, they're not playing it slavishly like '50s rock and roll. They're
yeah,
doing it as they would do it in their moment, and then people in the '70s doing glam rock, that also harkens back to earlier stuff,
yeah,
but they're playing it in their contemporary form. So it's
yeah.
like that's what I kind of think with stuff like this. It's like, the new with Silver Locket, I think I'm very happy, I think, with how we've got it in that kind of contemporary space with all its little influences from different nooks and crannies. They're all in there, but I think it kind of, I like that it has a bit of a contemporary sort of uh not a sheen, because there's no sheen to it, because you wouldn't want it to be a sheen, but it's got a contemporary overtone to it.
No, absolutely, yeah. You want it to be audible.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
No,
yeah.
but I think it's really
Exactly.
interesting when you listen to certain songs. Like, say, for example, the song Hocus Pocus, which is a great
Oh,
instrumental.
yeah, of course,
Like
yeah.
something
Focus,
like
yeah.
that when you hear like artists replicating that over the years, and
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's that's that kind of freak out sound that you were kind of talking about. Like it just like
Mm-mm,
really raw, really it just gets you going. And it's always interesting when you hear that replicate over the years. And it's like
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
you kind of can't go back to that. Even like, something like the instruments you play, unless you're like intentionally seeking out, because like, if you get like a Fender Precision, I don't know what type of bass you play, but if you get like a
Mm,
Fender Precision, say from
mm.
this, they don't make it like that. The wood's different, everything's
Yeah, yeah,
different.
yeah,
So
yeah. You
unless
get
you're
something really
intentionally going to
made.
spend rands of money getting the
Exactly,
old equipment,
exactly.
it's
Yeah,
never
yeah,
gonna,
yeah.
or like the big one is Ampeg bass basses,
Mm.
sorry, amps, bass amps. And
Mm.
it's just like, again, it's just different, it's just like the material is just different, and you're not going to
Exactly.
replicate that sound unless you're intentionally seeking it out. So
Exactly,
you
and it's
might as
what was
well.
it was what was in the room at the time as well, and it's what was in people's coming out of people's fingers at the time and everything. It
Yeah,
was everything to do with that moment, as well as the technology and the craftsmanship, and it's everything. All it's like, yeah,
yeah,
like as I say, it's like sure you could make your album in Studio Two in Abbey Road, and it's why doesn't it sound like Sergeant Pepper when you listen back to it? It's like you could
yeah,
have that dilemma as well.
yeah.
It's definitely I definitely get what you're saying. Like
One final thing I just want to ask is because
Mm,
this is going back to a lot of the discussions we were having about kind of the preservation of music and the
mm,
longevity of music. How do you
mm,
feel about artists going back, or sometimes even when they're deceased, people going back to their music and
mm.
remastering it and bringing out new packages, and it's like, here's this album. Like if an album was recorded say in mono, it's like, oh, here it is in stereo now.
Stereo version,
Are you,
yeah.
are you against that? Are you for that, or is it circumstantial?
I'm actually quite for that because I think the original is always there.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that thing in a kind of a because I kind of want to see how the movie was made or how the thing was written or how the whatever the kind of behind the curtain style of things. I do find that interesting, I think, and I like that people kind of have the ability to give a different perspective on something, as long as it's not completely sacrilegiously bastardizing something,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
a very, I know that's fine line territory as well, but like, let's say for example, like I'm as much of a slave to the corporate man as anything. Like anytime a deluxe edition of an album with all the outtakes and extended versions and a 100-page full color book comes out, you know it's like the bootleg thing. I fucking want it. You know what I mean? I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
own it.
yeah.
I want to possess it, and I want to have all the.
I remember that was a thing years ago during the
Mm.
CD era where because you had so much space on the CD like compared to a vinyl,
Yeah,
um
yeah, yeah.
people would, for deluxe editions, they would just take like an old bootleg recording and that sounded like shit,
Totally,
and it was like, oh, now you have like 14 new songs.
totally, totally. Sorry about this, man. Somebody's just come to the door. Do you mind if I just run and get it?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to sign off after this question, but yeah, I'll just
Yeah,
leave.
Grant, yeah, no worries.
Teach a few music
That's right.
lessons in the evening.
That's
So
fine. I won't take up any
I have a
more of your
wee,
time. Yeah,
I have
no,
a student next door.
no, it's been really nice talking with you, man.
Yeah, no, great chatting
There's
to
so
you too.
much more could pick out your brain at, but I'll let you go.
That's all
Thanks
right,
very
man. No, it's
much,
lovely
man.
chatting as
And
well.
is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up or anything?
Nothing major really. Just as I say that the single is out now is the main message really. That's kind of
Yeah.
the bottom line of it all. So out on
Perfect.
the 14th, and if people want to listen and enjoy, then the more the merrier.
And stay tuned to all your social media and all that for any live
Absolutely,
shows,
absolutely.
anything like that.
Yeah,
You
exactly,
plan on
exactly.
doing any live gigs or anything around?
We have a couple of things coming up. Yeah, actually, yeah, we're playing in. I'm not sure when this goes out, but we're
I'll
playing.
try and get out for the day.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, very good. So on the 30th of November, actually, we'll be playing in the Foggy Dew. That's our next Dublin gig.
Perfect.
So that'll be on the 30th. We'll be playing there. And we're supporting the Undertones actually before the year's out, which we're
Nice.
buzzing about. Big favorite band of ours as well.
Mhm.
We're supporting them on the 6th of December. We did a gig with them in Limerick earlier in the year. Now we're doing another one with them. Actually, funny enough, in Cavan.
Oh,
Uh,
perfect.
yeah, yeah. So it's a hometown show as well. And we'll be hopefully heading over to the UK again as well. Let's say we were over during the summer, but we've more UK stuff lined up for the new year as well. So that's kind of the main bullet points. But there probably will be other stuff coming in, like we're doing the Dublin David Bowie Festival as well next year in February. And if as I say, it's tune into the Instagram and the Facebook and all that sort of stuff, and any kind of more short notice gigs and events, it'll all be there.
Perfect. Thanks very much for your time, Evan, and enjoy
No
the rest
worries,
of your
lad.
day.
Great to speak to you.
Nice. Take care. Bye.
All right, chat to you, lad.
Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We're an independent venture run by yours truly, and as I said at the beginning, liking, rating, subscribing, and sharing really helps us out a lot. If you're feeling extra generous, we do have a PayPal donation link in the episode description, but don't feel obligated, of course. We've also begun releasing occasional exclusive episodes on Spotify, so subscribe there if you'd be interested in hearing those. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.